Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Norfolk Select Board. It is Tuesday, October 15th at approximately 7 p.m. My name is Kevin Calcutt and I'm joined by my fellow board member, Chris Weeder. We're also joined by our town administrator, Blythe Robinson, and our executive assistant, Judith Lazardi. As a reminder, this meeting is being audio and video recorded consistent with the open meeting laws of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It will be rebroadcasted to NCTV's government cable channel, as well as uploaded to NCTV's YouTube channel. With that, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Blythe, would you mind taking us through our agenda this evening?
Sure. After public comment, the DPW is here to make a presentation about their capital projects and to answer any questions you have about items that are included in their capital plan for this next year. Action items include consider appointing Timothy Martin to the Zoning Board of Appeals, to consider appointing a new parking clerk, to consider signing a grievance settlement with the DPW union, to consider executing proclamations for 4 Eagle Scouts, and approval of a turkey trot road race on Thanksgiving, November 28th of this year. And for discussion items, we have a gentleman here who would like to discuss the possible anniversary parade for Norfolk's 150th anniversary in 2020, to discuss the town meeting warrant and the various articles, to discuss an update on those various policies of the Select Board, and then to discuss the status of the Selectmen's work plan. We have several warrants to be approved and 3 sets of meeting minutes to be approved.
Very good. Thank you very much. All right, so with that this evening, we'll start with our public comment period. As a quick reminder, anybody who'd like to speak, if you'd be so kind as to please sign in. I believe we have our sign-in sheets right over there, and we'll be happy to hear from anybody who is interested. Mr. Rosenberg, do I even have to ask at this point? Thank you, sir.
Good evening. So one thing is I'd like to remind the Select Board that I continue to be interested in enhanced citizen engagement in town, and I took advantage of the select office hours and had a discussion with Kevin earlier where we were talking about possible ways to advance that. I continue to very much want to see that advanced and want to help with that. The other thing I wanted to mention was I was at the transfer station and I noticed that bottles that had 5-cent deposits thing were just being tossed into a dumpster, and the 5 cents on each bottle was essentially being thrown away. That's not terrible because that money goes to the state, or but we're not collecting it back from the state, and it does get the bottles off the road. But I would really prefer to see deposits from bottles and cans go to Norfolk if possible, and if that's not possible, go to a charity, and if that's not possible, go to some citizen who's interested. And I could think that if the deposit bottles and cans were separately collected, either some town employee could retrieve them and get the deposit, or the town could perhaps make an arrangement with citizens who wanted to do that, or give them to charity or something. But it sort of hurts me to see money being thrown away. Those are my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else for public comment this evening? Anne-Marie, public comment this evening? No? All good? Okay. All right. In that case, I think we can move on to our presentation from the DPW.
Great. So the director, Bob McGee, is here, and his assistant, Barry, are both here to go over with you their overall capital plan, their portion of what we've put together. They're going to focus on the priorities in the first couple of years. I asked them to spend, in particular, some time on pavement management, since the quality of our roadways is very much a present topic here in Norfolk. and be able to give you some details, if you would like them, about some of the specific requests we have on the special town meeting warrant for the fall. So, thank you, gentlemen.
Gentlemen, welcome.
Good evening. Bob McGee, Director of Public Works. I'm here tonight with the Assistant Director of Public Works, Barry, and what we're about to present to you tonight is quite pretty much a carryover of some years gone by. But as you know, when we talk about roads and stuff, roads just don't get better by themselves, so they're never going to fall behind. Some roads might get a little bit more deteriorated over the course of a winter, maybe because of a utility installation, and that might jump ahead of a street that we've identified 2 years ago. You know, so things like that happen. But and then we also have an equipment presentation, list of equipment that we have needs for. And with that, Barry has put together a presentation with, after reviewing this in depth in consultation with our town administrator. So at this point, I'd like to just turn this over to Barry, where he put this all together and make some sense out of it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Just a quick slide, just going over the agenda. So we kind of first look at our, Mike.
Can we get you?
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, that's even better. Thank you. I don't have to hold it. So the first thing was a quick overview of our CIP, just highlighting how we pulled some of the information together. We're going to get a little bit more in depth on the pavement management program and how we arrived at that. Take a look at our proposed FY20 capital plan, and even if we want to take a farther look down the road, some of the highlights of our FY21-22 CIP. So we're going to start off with is how we prioritized our basically our wish list. So we looked at road construction stabilization. Information with that was gathered through the pavement management program. Major roadway projects, that was another component of the pavement management program. We then looked at equipment, age and replacement and upgrades was a criteria we used. Facility, functionality and age replacement. Compliance, we're under scrutiny of a lot of state and federal mandates, so that came into our CIP. And technology, updates to our existing systems and practices. A couple pictures down below is a picture of our truck H17. DPW parking lot, that's in our CIP, and our roll-off truck for the transfer station is also in our CIP. Just to give you a little bit more in-depth look, not to go into all of our CIP, but how we prioritize our equipment. So we looked at the age of the vehicle, the factor of replacing it, and the importance to the DPW of its functionality, and then just a little description as to what each piece of equipment is. As you can see, we have a lot of older vehicles in our fleet. I think throughout the years, the DPW has done a great job of keeping these vehicles running, but we're getting to the point in their life cycle where we're spending more money to keep them running than investing into new pieces of equipment. Again, down the bottoms, picture of the interior of the Sterling roll-off truck H17, and on our wish list is the trackless. The trackless machine is a priority to us. It's a multi-use machine, so there's many attachments that we can put on it. But we're primarily looking at it as for our roadside brush cutting program that we're looking to implement. A lot of the focus on the DPW right now is clearing roadside brushes, trees and branches and what like that. We'd like to implement an overall program. So this is just some of the criteria that we use to give you guys an idea of how we develop our CIP, and this is just the equipment portion of it. Any questions on that?
Not from my perspective, Chris.
All right, now we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the pavement management program. So one of the first things Bob had me do when I came to town is to go out and look at the roadways. So I have a lot of experience in my previous career. I worked in 100 different towns throughout Massachusetts doing exactly this. Looking at the roadway inventory, creating a rating system for it, and coming up with recommendations to prioritize and repair the roadways. This is all done through AASHTO and federal standards, so there is a baseline for looking at the roadways. Excuse me. So you may ask, why do we need a pavement management program? Well, this helps us look at our roads. It's more cost-effective to keep good roads good. So the pavement management program is an inventory tool. It helps us prioritize roadway improvements, allows us to forecast budgetary needs, and allows us to do capital planning. So here's a quick roadway profile. So I basically used the Mass DOT road centerline data with existing town records and was able to come up with a basic list of accepted, unaccepted roadways in town. So we have 72.34 accepted roadway miles, 71.77 is paved, 0.58 is gravel. It's primarily the new section of Lake Street. We have roughly 10 miles of an unaccepted road, a mile of state road. Other roads would be paper streets and things like that. So our total roadway network is 93.53 miles. This is an existing conditions summary. So this breaks down the current conditions of our roadway. So we have 11 miles of roadway that are in the F, so reclamation, 20 miles of roadway that are a D in rehabilitation, 14.39 miles of road that are C, which are in preventative maintenance, 15 miles in routine maintenance, and then 10, almost 11 miles where no maintenance required. What this kind of shows us is the breakdown of the repair types throughout town. You can see that 29% of our roads are in that D category, rehabilitation, and I'll go into the different repair strategies in a minute. So this also shows us that if we went out the door today and did all these repairs, we're looking at about $12 million. And this is curb-to-curb paving only. This doesn't include drainage, sidewalks, and anything else that we might do on the roadway. So our overall rating is currently a 66.53. So this bar chart kind of better shows what we're looking at. As you can see, the rehabilitation roadways are a high percentage of our network, giving us an OCI, Operational Condition Index. You might hear RSR, Road Surface Rating, or PCI, Pavement Condition Index. They all mean the same thing. So our overall average for our 71 miles of accepted paved roadways is a 66.53. Then there's a color-coded map that kind of shows you the exact same information as the bar chart, just color-coded. So the defer maintenance roads, the roads that are in good shape, are an A. Routine maintenance roads are a B. They're in the light blue. Preventative maintenance roads are that neon green. Rehabilitation is an orange, and reclamation is an F. So it kind of gives you a feeling of an overall network of our system. Now here's some pictures to help you better understand what a reclamation road looks like. So for example, this is a section of Fruit Street. So reclamation involves us ripping up the roadway, getting it down to the gravel layer, redoing the gravel layer, and in essence, rebuilding the entire roadway. Mill and overlay, as a good example, would be Noon Hill. So in this case, we would go in, mill out the asphalt, an inch and a half, and then repave it, bringing back up the roadway. Preventative maintenance. So we do a lot of section patching in town. So we'll mill out certain sections of roadway that are in bad shape, such as this section on Holbrook Street, and then repave it, basically not restoring the whole roadway, but taking out that bad section. There's a lot of different types of preventative maintenance, and we can go on into that forever. Routine maintenance, that'd be your crack seal roadways. Audubon Trail is a good example of a roadway that could use crack seal. Defer maintenance. So these are roads that were in good shape, recently paved in the last 3 to 5 years. Winston Road's a good example. You look at it, it's not black and shiny and brand new. It's a light gray, but the road is still in good shape. If you look at Lawrence Street, we have a brand new roadway. You can obviously see that it's in really, really good shape because it's brand new. Where do we get, basically, we also use this program to identify funding sources. So our current funding source only for roadways is Chapter 90. We get roughly $400,000 a year to maintain all the roads within town. There is other local grants and other funding and TIP projects, but a lot of that is more on the reconstruction of roadways where we're getting into rebuilding whole roadway corridors. Ideally, we want to be doing a balanced approach. So we want to be doing crack sealing, preventative maintenance. We want to be doing the gamut of repair strategies. not a worst first approach. Unfortunately, that's where we are right now. So 80% of our budget goes to mill and overlay of roadways. 10% goes to reclamation. The other 10% goes to section patching. So we are in a worst first plan. So we're not doing a nice balanced approach where we're trying to keep our good roads good. We're fighting the battle and trying to make our bad roads good, which is costing us more money. So to give you an idea of what spending would look like. So our current OCI is a 66.53. If we keep spending the $400,000 for the next 5 years, our OCI is going to drop to a 63.42. We need about $1.05 million to maintain the status quo. That is a 66.53. $1.2 million in our paving budget would raise us to a 67. $1.4 million would raise us to a 68. And again, this is just paving the roadways. It doesn't include drainage, sidewalks, and ramps. So this is just maintaining the black infrastructure. And I just put this in the words so you can better understand it. So 400 a year will actually drop us 3 points in 5 years. 800K, put it in there, it will drop us 1.2 points in 5 years. Ideally, 1.2 million would be great because now we're seeing an increase. And you know, a lot of towns fall into the idea of, hey, we could throw a whole bunch of money into the roadways right now and raise that OCI. But you have to remember, we raise that OCI, now we have to maintain that number. So there's also another investment involved in that. That's my pavement. Any questions on the pavement management?
Chris, questions?
No, I think we all know it. Our roads are in terrible shape, and we've got to put a priority. And I think a lot of people don't realize that we only put $400,000 a year of Chapter 90 money to it. And I think we definitely have to put more. So this is a great start.
Yeah, so ideally what we like to see is we're using the Chapter 90 money to basically maintain the subdivisions in the secondary roadways and get an input of money from the town so we can maintain the major roadways that everybody uses. So we can strike a balance with it. And it's not, a lot of towns actually do that, where they'll spend, you know, the town money on the main roads because everybody uses that, and then the Chapter 90 money on the cul-de-sacs and neighborhood roadways that not everybody uses, but everybody should, you know, see some sort of benefit from the paving that we're doing.
Barry, do you have any historical baseline that you were comparing against? I know that's kind of hard to go back and identify.
No, we do
whatever
have some historical stuff. I could tell you, so when I started this, the program actually carries the original baseline number. It was a 66.73 when I did it. The nice thing about the program is every time we pave a roadway, I automatically update it. The program also has a deduction value in it. So the roads are actually falling at 2 points on the anniversary date of the inspection. And the program allows me to go into and say, let's say Needham Street had a bad winter, it fell apart. I can go in and adjust that specific street accordingly. So I don't have to adjust the whole network, I can fine-tune each roadway. Good example would be Medway between Chatham and Truro. That took a beating this winter. When I looked at it again, I was able to lower that rating of that roadway and then balance the network. So we do have, there is a lot of good checks and balances in it. I'd say, you know, give us another year or two. But I think where trending is, the numbers are pretty solid, that this is what we're holding at.
I think it's also important, as Barry said, to start to get to the point where we can spend some money on the roads that are in the B category. Doing some crack sealing extends the life of that road, and it's far less expensive to do that and keep that road at a better quality for a longer period before it starts to deteriorate. You know, as we slowly catch up and then we start to spend more in those other areas, we can use our dollars more wisely in the future, and that's going to be critical.
Unfortunately, looking at our network, we don't have a whole lot of those roads that fall into that 3 to 5. You want to look at a road within that 3 to 5 years where you want to give that crack seal. You know, again, to Blythe's point, we're doing mill and overlays. You know, that's one of the most expensive processes to do. You know, there's crack seals, there's chip seals, there's different types of treatments we can look into to extend our dollar. But that also comes with some public understanding. You know, not every road is going to be a beautiful, smooth surface. It might have a rough texture to it. So there's a lot of stuff out there that we can look at. I've worked with a lot of towns in the areas that implementing different strategies. I just think we need the buy-in of everybody, and they have to understand what we're putting down on the roadways.
Ed, I'm sorry, could you just use the microphone, please? Thank you.
Sorry, Ed had it. What about these other costs? Are these hidden costs or? I mean,
No, they're not hidden costs. So
What about,
basic-
why don't you talk about those that,
Because when we're looking at pavement management, basically, we're looking at the surface of the roadway, we say, what is it gonna cost to pave this roadway? Now, I do have some calculations where I could add, 10% for engineering, 20% for drainage, but every roadway that we look at, I can't figure all that out. So this is just a good baseline for say, hey, we're gonna pave this roadway, this is what it's gonna cost. Any roads that we have poor drainage on, there's gonna be a little bit more engineering involved, there's gonna be a higher price tag. So we're talking about roads that we know we can go out right now, do some sort of repair on without touching the drainage, getting really into the nuts and bolts of it, and fixing the roadways. And we're also lucky in a lot of our roadways in town, we don't have drainage, so a lot of it's country drainage. We have, water running off the sides of the roads, so that helps us out a little bit as well.
But certainly if there was an interest in saying adding a sidewalk to a section or a road where isn't one now, that's not included in these numbers, and that's a separate conversation about whether that's necessary. Are we going to make that street complete if it's possible? I think you've all talked about that in the past, whether we need to obtain right-of-way to be able to put it in. There's just a whole nother conversation that would have to happen about those sorts of things.
Barry, do we still have a sidewalk fund? And do we have any money in that sidewalk fund? At one point, we established a sidewalk fund for every development going in. Does anybody know what happened to that?
There is a balance that's being held by the planning board. I don't know what that would be, but last time we used any of that, I think we did some improvements in the center of town. But there is a balance in the planning board. Now, if I don't know if it's like $30,000 or $15,000, but it's not $150,000 for sure.
I mean, that'd be the next, basically, the pavement management is just the tip of the iceberg. I have a sign inventory, guardrail inventory, sidewalk inventory. We're gonna have to get into the position so we know all these numbers. We're having issues with a lot of the street trees are now blowing through the sidewalks. The roots are coming through. That's something I have to get on my radar. We have to start looking at that. So, as assets go, we have a lot of them, and they all need to get a hard look at, and there's gonna be some hard numbers involved with that as well.
One thing I'd like to add, if you don't mind, with your comment, with regards to any of these applications, with the exception of the crack sealed and the deferred maintenance, as we'd call them, if we were going to overlay a street, mill a street, or if we were going to reclamate a street, we would never do it without looking at the drainage. I wouldn't want anybody to go away thinking that we wouldn't complete a street without flipping the covers, doing an evaluation on each structure. And that when we really do crunch numbers and we do put a number together for a street, there's a calculation for the drainage and, a little bit of tree clearing. A lot of times, we try to look at the whole right-of-way, and a lot of it's grown up. Chris, you've heard, and Blythe has been made aware of so many times the streets have grown in, where we used to go down and brush cut little trees like this, or now trees like this, and now it's a $800 investment. And we got to get back to that. But, and the other thing Blythe was mentioning is that a whole nother story is the sidewalks, but we look at what we have in our water system. And if we know that we have asbestos concrete pipe or something in some place, or we want to replace that before we pave, reclamate a street, put that kind of investment into it. Not all the times we can do that, so we have to put a quick application over the top, and the water can last for another 10 years. But all these factors go into that question of yours.
Sir Alex, go right ahead, sir.
Way before any of yous were on these boards or even in town, the water service, especially running down 115, was put in and run by the prisons. That is an 8-inch asbestos pipe. That asbestos pipe has a corporation coming out of it with 1 foot of lead pipe. That lead pipe fastens to a piece of steel pipe that goes to what they call the curb stop. Now, one of those photos right there of the new road showed in front of my house where the lead popped. Now, back about 10, 12, maybe even more years ago, it came up before town meeting to replace that line. And the good people of Norfolk decided not to replace that line. So now, if one of these lines that is lead, it's only a foot long, but it's from the corporation, which is a valve that fastens to the asbestos pipe. If that goes in one area, lead basically is all about the same on age. You're going to get it with the rest of them. So are we covering over stuff that we're just going to end up putting a bunch of patches in as these pipes go? This is nothing against the highway department, water department. They asked, they wanted it replaced. But at town meeting, they refused the funding to replace that bad line. That line's been in there since the 30s, and it's an asbestos line.
So to answer that is, as part of our proposed capital plan for a few years out, we're well aware of the AC pipe that we have in town. We haven't had any major issues, but I'll be honest with you, it's one of the things that keeps me up at night. I was in a town that had a lot of AC pipe, and when it started going, it was going. So one of the first things we kind of have to look at is to research where we have the AC pipe, come up with a program of how we're going to replace it, and again, that dovetails into our major projects, because I wouldn't go rip up 115 to replace AC pipe if we weren't going to do something else on that roadway. So all these projects intertwine and relate to each other. I'll follow up with Al, but I'm pretty sure we had a lead connection removal program going on, and I'll follow up with him to double check on that one because I'm not quite aware of that one. But the AC pipe is on our radar.
If you looked at the page on the water fund in your CIP, we're projecting $450,000 a year starting in FY '21 each year. It doesn't identify exactly where we would replace transit pipe, and it would have to be, that would come out of the water fund. It's in your actual budget, CIP budget page. But we are looking ahead and planning to be doing a certain amount of that every year for a number of years to get that all out of the system. But as Barry correctly points out, we need to coordinate that with other work that we would be wanting to get done at the same time.
Yep. So I mean, it's going to be I think the initial phases are going to be identifying, at this point in time, there is no issues with our AC pipe. It's pretty solid. A lot of it's embedded in good sand. Nothing's going on. Hopefully it stays that way for another 50 years. But it's something we just have to keep in the back of our minds. Kind of take you through our FY20 CIP. So we had road construction stabilization in our FY20 CIP for $400,000. It was not included in the fall town meeting. We have supplemental money for Lake Street at $140,000 with potentially borrowing it. The transfer station roll-off truck, that's about $196,000, potentially borrowing for that. The high lift mower / collector, the grounds crew needs a new mower. That's $17,500. We have a line in here for the Holbrook Well water main installation. We're looking for about $270,000. That to come out of retained earnings. But the idea is we don't have all the numbers in for the new well construction costs. We are hoping that within the well construction costs, there'll be enough left over that we will be able to install the water main. The 270 is more of a cushion to make sure that we can install the new water main once the well is in, for a total about $1.239 million. Pictures below, picture of the new roll-off truck that we are looking at, a picture of our existing one, and again, just a picture of Fruit Street to show conditions of roadways.
Do we have any plans, what roads are we planning on finishing up the rest of this year? They're F&Ds. Do we have any that we're still
We
doing?
our roadway paving for this year, Bob can elaborate, but it was ended on us, not by our own design.
So basically what's happened is, that we did Cleveland Street and a few other streets. We did that, we were forced to do that. We had an installation going on Seekonk Street. We had to divert the traffic. Cleveland Street was falling apart, so we diverted money that we were going to install on Main Street over to there. But the long story is we have a balance of 3 streets. One is Ash Road, because there was a drainage issue there, which actually took out some private property assets. And we've promised that some years back, so it's a small paving job. We waited for this bank to be complete and all the site work around the bank, so we have a little stretch of 115 around the roundabout and Union Street all the way down to Castle. That was the second one, and the third one that we doesn't look like we're going to get these 3 done is Medway Branch from Tucker Road down to the transfer station. We were hoping to get those done. Simple to do. I think what happened is, because I think everybody needs an explanation, is that we've got approved funding through Chapter 90, approved through this board, is P.J. Keating won the bid, but they won it everywhere, and I think a little bit of greed got involved or something because they bid off a little more than they could chew. So they have so many multiple towns where we just couldn't fit into their schedule, and they were looking for 6 weeks out planning. And as you know, when we propose a road to be done, we have the funding in place, we expect that we get an answer within 2 weeks that it's going to be nearby. So we go out and we start with our own crews, save a lot of this money that Barry's been talking about with our own crews by, road shoulder work, drainage work, and we absorb that in-house. P.J. Keating hasn't come through, and I don't mind exposing him right now. I've complained to the surge group who host a bid for 20 towns, strength in numbers B. And I've discussed it with them, and they're just too busy to meet with us this year. So over the winter, I think we'll get into it. You're going to do the work for us, so we're going to take an alternate bid and approach it that way.
And none of the other paving companies that we use can fill in
Well,
this
there's
gap.
procurement laws. It's going to
Just
it
one
takes a
less.
little bit more, and then now we're at the time of the year where everybody's
Right.
looking to get things done,
Scrambling.
school projects, and the paving before November and the snowfall. So.
I think part of what works against us is because we only have Chapter 90 money to spend, we're at the mercy of the state coming through that process before we can really give a paving company the green light to get work done. And if all the communities, or many of the communities are in the same boat,
That's right.
then they are backlogged with all the work they have to get done. When we can get to the point where we can fund some of this ourselves and be a little bit more in control of our schedule and ahead of Chapter 90, I think we'll have a better chance at whomever the contractor is, getting them in here more on our schedule to get the work done. But I
So
think that's part of the
yeah.
challenge.
We're gonna have a busy year next year, so we'll carry over these three streets, plus any other streets that we're planning to do. So it's gonna be a rough stretch to get it all done, but we'll get it done. I'll just give a little highlight of our proposed FY '21, 2020, 2022, what we're kind of looking for. Again, the road construction stabilization, we're asking for that 400,000. We've also highlighted some major roadway projects. So if you add up the 400,000 that we were asking for, plus our Chapter 90, and each one of the major roadway projects that we're looking at is about 400,000. That puts us right in that $1.2 million area. Roundabouts, replacement equipment, a lot of compliance. Cemeteries, we need to start thinking about our cemeteries. We're slowly dwindling on space at the Norfolk Cemetery, Pondville Cemetery. The town has kept really great records on index cards with all the cemetery information, which we've converted over to Excel spreadsheets, which actually makes it easier for us to go to a computer software that would help us with our cemeteries. But now looking at it, I think we might need to look at some more planning and not just the technology. I have about Norfolk Cemetery off the top of my head, I have about 80 general spaces left. I think I about have 130 veteran spaces. I think roughly 120 spaces up at Pondville Cemetery. So we're getting to the point where, we might have to start talking about whether we're going to stay in the cemetery business, find a new location to create a cemetery, some information there. Sewer enterprise, we're looking for upgrades and maintenance to the system, long-term repairs to the sewer system. Water enterprise, replace Spruce Road generator. This is definitely on our radar. We're having some issues with our generator down there. This might come sooner than later than we are proposing in 21. Here we start talking about the transite pipe replacement program, the AC pipe program. Water main looping projects, that's another important part of our system. We don't want to have dead-end pipes at cul-de-sacs in middle of the roadway. We want a loop system, so when we flush it, we have a lot cleaner water. And then possibly some equipment for the water department. So it's just kind of highlight of what's coming up next. It's not go crazy dwelling on that one. We have our wish list in front of you now, so I guess we should focus on that.
Want to talk to us about the roll-off truck, near and dear to my heart.
There you go.
How many times does this go out? Does this go out every day?
Yeah.
So 5 days a week?
Not necessarily every day.
Yeah.
No, we make runs 2-3 times a week. But we
And that's
make-
what, a 40-yard dumpster, basically, one load?
Exactly, right.
It's got 360,000 miles on it, and it's 13 years old.
Yeah, I got a 1997 truck that's at 370,000 miles on it.
Okay,
so I
you
don't-
win.
The me mileage, on it, it's a diesel, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that's not a lot. I guess I have, the optics of it, and Bob, I'm always on this. We have a C20 or a C30 orange stake body truck. Years ago, it was no good, falling apart, have to replace it. And I see it,
rack body?
yeah, and I see it everywhere.
Truck. Yeah.
I see it everywhere in town, driving around.
That's a parts truck.
But it's around driving. I've seen it in Rentham. I've seen it in Plainville. We have a fire station ranger or something in town here that the DPW inherited that I see picking up trash loaded to the gills with all the recreation fields trash. And I see, and I know our police are here. I see police cars being replaced all the time. And yet I have 5 new maintenance vehicles sitting out in the parking lot here that were old police cruisers. And the optics to me is, if all these vehicles are no good, why are they all still here? And when I hear that, a truck leaks oil, fix it. When I hear a truck needs welding, weld it. To me, 390,000 miles on a truck is not that much on a diesel truck.
Well, Chris, to your point, I think the problem is, I think it was always good intentions. Good intentions have kept all these vehicles running past the point where they probably shouldn't be running. We can show you numbers for the roll-off of what we're putting into it to try to maintain it, whereas purchasing a new roll-off would actually save us money in the long term. I know Bob's talked to Charlie about this a lot. There's transmission issues with the truck. There's a lot of investment we'd have to make to keep that truck running, and we're at the point where we're at that breaking point, no return of investment. Is it really worth putting the time and money into that truck to try to keep it running or get something new?
Have we looked at subbing out the transferring of this business?
We
I mean,
have.
I know I spend $450 to get a 40-yard dumpster removed from Graham Waste. That's what it costs me. That includes their dumpster, their driver, their gas. Does it make sense to start looking at subbing out, or can't you sub out this business?
We did survey around to see what trucking outfits are available to take on our business. And years ago, we even did it for the town of Millis because they had a truck in despair, or they didn't have a truck at all. And now they have a new truck, and every once in a while they help us out. The most impact that I can tell you is without this truck, we're just out of business. People come down Midway Branch with materials, recyclings, disposal, solid waste, whatever they come down with, has to leave that site. So we sort separate. Just a quick, you know this, Chris, but for anybody else, a quick lesson is we separate out the recyclers and they go off the market. So we go up to Millbury, we go into Charlestown, and the truck goes out, like I said, 3 to 5 times a week. But the metal fatigue on that, yeah, we can weld it. The cab inside is kind of tough to look at. If you look at it, there's almost like no dashboard. The Sterling model is out of business now, so getting parts is mostly a fabrication. But yes, we could operate that truck probably for another 3 years, but that would cost money, and then you measure against that what the payment would be if you loaned on it. The other thing too is, where are we going to be in 3 years? Maybe we'll be flat broke. Maybe the elections will bring us more poverty. If there's a shot at getting it this year, I think we need to go after it. I'm thriftier than you, actually, Chris. I like the way you, because if you look at the streets and the lack of money that we have to do the streets, we've been patching these streets together for so long that I'm just worn out. I'll never give up on my town. I'm not really worn out, but I mean, it's got to. We need to come up with. We can operate that truck, but if there's a chance to replace it, do it now. If not, do it next year. But you can't say that we didn't warn you, because in 3 years, when it does fall, the guy falls through the panel boards or whatever, and we don't have money, we got to shut down business, or we got to go to the more expensive, find Child's Trucking, because I ran a solid waste on the Cape, and the Cape is very, very strict on their environmental, the trucking and everything that happens down there, and the trucking outfits down there, trucking off-site. I've measured and I've done all the trucking measurements and stuff like that, and it's just cheaper to own your own truck, not to depend on somebody else. And if they break down, what we've been doing when this truck breaks down is we move another can into place, and we move that can into place with the use of a front end loader. while the mechanics get to work on this thing, or we bring it up to CN Ward or something like that. But I love your questions, because pressed, we can use that truck for another 2 or 3 years. What do you think?
Hopefully.
You
Yeah,
know,
I'd just like to
but-
look at the analysis. I mean, we have Dover Trucking right here in town, and like I said, I use them all the time, these dumpsters companies, and it's one of those things that you say, is there a better way? And I understand we use it also to deliver to residents and things, mulch and things, but I just think it's very difficult, because I know I talked to Andy Basanowski, and he said, police cruisers every 120,000 miles, you should recycle them.
Yep.
And I say, 120,000 miles, I haven't even broken in my vehicle
Well,
yet.
the big thing with
But
the police
it's
is.
very hard to but I said, on a truck
Yeah.
like this, that's a diesel, that's made to handle these kind of loads, I see them. I mean, I've talked to the guys at Graham Waste. I actually asked the guy today, I say, how much is on this truck you've got? And he said, 630,000 miles. And I'm going, I've got half of that on our truck. We should be able to run these better.
Well, I think the big nut is, we have some prices to fix the transmission and the other thing on it, and they're huge expenses. So we're at that point where, do we want to invest, $15,000, $20,000 into a truck to keep running for 2 years? Or are we at that point where to make a purchase for a new one and keep it running, keep that one running for 20 years?
You know, Blythe's asked me now, and I haven't done it, but I'll do a survey on the rentals. I'll give you, let me just get you some.
Just to see.
You bet, you
All
bet.
right.
And you know what, maybe I'm wrong, because I didn't do it. It's been 2 years since I've done it.
And I don't know and I don't understand if the towns have a different program that you can't,
Yeah.
that a private enterprise can't do it the same way. But you look at the vehicle, you look at the operator, you look at the pension, you look at vacation, health. I mean, you add all that up, because you have to have somebody drive this vehicle, and I assume he's a full-time employee for the town, right?
Yeah.
It's expensive. See, it's not just the truck. You gotta look at those other costs.
I think it's well worth getting a price and understanding what that would be over the same period of time a truck would live, would lifespan. I also want to comment on the vehicles that we've recycled downwards. We're not going to be able to continue to do that if when we become a green community. You can't recycle a vehicle downwards if it doesn't meet the miles per gallon standards that have to be in place. It might have been a good way in the past to take a vehicle that was high use and change it to a lower use category, say in facilities, but I think we're going to have to look at all those in the future. And I don't blame you at all for being frustrated that if we say it's so bad it needs to be replaced, why do we still have it? I think we need to have that conversation about all of our vehicles going forward.
One last comment on that, because I really do enjoy your thinking on this, but the solid waste is part of the general fund, where water is supported by its own membership, so to speak. But the solid waste does collect a revenue, and I can tell you that 3 years ago, when the recycling markets were good, with the salaries, with the overhead, with everything that we had, it cost the town $14,000 to run an entire division. Well, you think of what we spend in highway and grounds and so forth, it does earn its money. It's been kind of not as good lately, and I can also provide that statistic for you, how much money we turned in at the end of the year versus expenses.
Great.
Not to mention that it's a service to the town. We do our diligence with recycling, and it's encouraged. You know, a lot of towns will have curbside pickup, and I'll warn you to this: if you ever decide to go curbside pickup, you're going to see every resident bring their solid waste, their garbage out to the corner, the end of their driveway. You're going to get into a windstorm. It's going to blow all over the place. I've worked in 4 other towns where we've had dedication of men going out picking up trash where the prevailing winds would carry it. And this town is clean because of what we've provided them with the solid waste. They come in, they go. It's quite a place to go. They meet, they talk. But just some considerations. But I'll look and I'll try to get those stats for you, Chris.
Thanks, Bob.
Barry, I've seen you put together performers before for comparisons on things just like this, so I know this is right in your wheelhouse,
Yep.
so that'd be great, thank you. Good question, Chris.
Questions about any of the other items that are on the fall town meeting list while the gentlemen are here?
Like a mower? I'm going to ask the same silly question. Our highway department is stretched to its ends. They can't get everything done. To me, grass cutting is something that we should be looking at farming out to a subcontractor. We spend an awful lot of time cutting grass in this town, and I think it's one of those areas that there's companies that specialize in just cutting grass. Have we looked into subbing out our grass
did.
cutting so our highway workers can focus on the cutting back of the brush, doing all the other things
Yeah.
that we need them to do, that we can't do, because we don't,
No.
I mean, how many people are in your highway department? I think we all think there's 30 people there,
5.
but I know there isn't.
Well, there's highway and ground, so between them, there's 9, I think.
9.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's
We
not a
got
lot of
one new
bodies.
one this year.
Yeah.
Right, but we did do that, Chris, and by the time the end of this meeting, you'll probably fire me, because I'm not meeting with you on all these points, but, no, honestly, we did it before, where we
You're
picked up
honest,
some.
that's all I want. That's
I'm
all
going
I
to give you the
want.
truth, like it or not. But anyways, we did sub it out, and we found out that it was, during the season, sometimes you got to do 2 cuts, because you got to make it to Friday, and then when you don't come in for Saturday and Sunday, the grass still grows, and that's where all the people come out. So we've studied this thing, we did all the statistical data, and found out that it was easier to just put one more guy on to pick up the work, that we had a lawn outfit come in. I wish I could remember their name. But it was nothing but misery. And the recreation director would come in and complain because we didn't have the hands-on ability to make the correction that she needed, because we were subbing it out. So we did like the town hill. Actually, we gave out the town hill, the ball fields. We did the cemeteries ourselves. But at that time, we had lost the guy. One guy retired, so we only had 2 guys on grounds as it was. So it was good enough to sub it out. We tried it, and it just didn't work out. It's the
It might work
recreation's
out for
demanding.
some applications in some locations, but maybe in recreation fields, that's where we want to have the ability to respond immediately if necessary. And I think recreation needs to be a part of that conversation to make sure that everyone understands what the expectation is and how to deliver it.
Yeah, we've talked about it internally, and so people don't realize that every time a new subdivision comes aboard, and town acceptance, it comes with grass strips, it comes with other things, so, we're consistently adding new areas for us to maintain and mow. Bob and I have discussed, looking at some of the police station, for example. That might be a prime run to sub out to somebody else and let them take care of that. We actually looked at, if you look at the buildings around Island Lighting and MAS, they have a landscaper that maintains both of those property for them. I mean, isn't an option to look at them and to say, hey, why don't you maintain the police station for us as well? So it's not something we haven't looked at, we haven't thought about. I think it's just tough, not having that flexibility with, hey, Johnny, I need you to run over there and take care of this, and a lot of it's going to be working with Ann. Her expectations for the field are very high. I think those fields look absolutely fabulous this year, and the guys did an awesome job on it, so we want to maintain that. So I think it's a bigger discussion that we need to have instead of just saying, let's farm it out.
Because farming out's going to require us to pay prevailing wage. It's not a matter of calling the local landscaper guy and just paying them whatever they would charge to do a homeowner's large yard. It's going to cost more for us to buy it than someone personally.
When we did bid that out, Chris, I still have the specifications, so along with the trucking stats, I'll send that over to you. You can see how how we did that.
Just like to say, I
You
mean,
bet, no problem.
owners have high expectations of their property, and maybe Ann's expectations are too high, because homeowners have expectations of their property too, and landscapers are meeting it. So there's got to be I know we have a $90,000 capital item for her fields to be done this year, improvements on the fields. I mean, our roads, and Bob said it, and Barry's shown it, they're our top priority. They're our top priority. I know our fields have got to look good, but our roads are our top priority, and we're not meeting the grade. And if we continue on this path, we're going to keep falling. And everybody sees it. Everybody sees it. And so we've got to prioritize our money, I think, towards our roads with regard to the DPW. To me, all this other stuff is all nice stuff if you had lots of cash. We don't have lots of cash.
I understand.
So this has got to be our priority. So trucks, mowers. I'd rather see 2 guys stand on the side of the road cutting branches with loppers than buying one of these pieces of machinery that does a horrible job, as far as I'm concerned, cutting sidewalk branches, and it's not good on sidewalks for snow plowing. I think it's money just poorly spent. Our money has to go into our roads, and when our roads get fixed, when we can build a new fire station, when we can do all that stuff, then we can get all these niceties. I don't believe in buying niceties till you get your core stuff fixed. I just don't. And so this machine, it reminds me of a Simplicity machine they used to sell years ago. You could cut your lawn weed your garden.
Oh, you mean the trackless?
Yeah.
Oh, that thing's unbelievable.
Oh, it's gorgeous. It's wonderful. It does everything.
It does.
Yeah, but you know what? I think it's just, I'd rather see two guys on the side of the road doing it with loppers, and they'd get it done just as fast if they move. You know, I think the key is making sure your workforce is moving, getting the work done, picking up the weeds, getting it done, picking up the branches as they go. And, you know, you can save a lot of money. I realize machinery is great to have, but we got a priority here, and I think it's got to be our roads.
Well, unfortunately, the town, for whatever reason, hasn't made roads a priority for I don't know how many years.
I understand it, and Bob
We
knows
still
it. He
have other
doesn't get the
jobs,
money.
we still have other jobs to do and need decent equipment to do it. I mean, I think the CIP, as I've said before, is a planning tool and to start having this discussion, but to not replace, we've got vehicles that are almost 30 years old, some of them. We can't just say we can keep them all running forever, and they have to have a priority at some point.
But I think we got to prioritize, like I said, these 5 maintenance vehicles we have, they're costing us money. If they were costing us money when they got pulled from the police department, they're costing us money to run on a temporary basis, and we're not even analyzing that cost because we're not thinking about it. And that money could be going money into his mower machine, so we've got to really start to look
Well,
at this.
with all due respect, we didn't used to think about it. What I'm saying is we are thinking about it now. We won't be able to continue to do that. We probably shouldn't.
I think we got to prioritize our spending, and I think our spending with regard to DPW has got to be towards our roads. Top priority. I don't know about this roll-off. I'd like to see that information on that. But I think our priority's got to be on the roads. And if we got to sock away money till next spring so we can get Keating or whoever's going to be winning the bid prior to getting our Chapter 90 money, we have to do it.
Well, the money that we don't spend this year from Chapter 90 stays in the account. It'll be ready for us to spend in the spring, so we can, unfortunately, we have to wait, but we'll be able to get that going right away. The other road money that we have in the budget for next year is to complete the work on Lake Street. The order of conditions has been issued, and,
Waiting on appeals.
I'm sorry?
Waiting on appeals. Actually, today was the last day to appeal.
So if that's not appealed, I mean, the town signed a settlement agreement that said that we would complete that road after the order was issued, that by the time we have town meeting, the next available time slot would be the spring when we can pave again. The plan is to get out there and complete that road from one end all the way to the other. So, yes, it's money spent on roads, not spent on some of the worst roads. You know, there's going to be differing opinions about that, I realize, but we're under an obligation to get that work done, at least on the unpaved section.
Do we have the money for Ash Street, Union Street, and Medway Branch still in the,
Approved Chapter 90 funds.
so we still have those?
So
in
it'll,
that, right?
it'll
be there.
stay in the account, so to speak, so we can get going on it in the spring.
Yeah, they'll be first up next year, carry over, and then we'll look at the list and look at all the other roads that we get added for next year. So that's why next year could be a tough year, because we'll have a lot of roads to get done.
I don't think anybody would disagree with your perspective that there is potentially some opportunity for us to dedicate more money to an area that I think you would find in the top 3 of resident concerns wherever you go in town today. But I would like to balance that against some more detailed analysis related to a comparison of how we're operating today versus a potential purchase like this and how that would affect many other areas than just what's on the surface. I get what you're saying about having loppers on the side of the road, but I imagine there's a flurry of other things involved in having that be an option versus utilizing one of these more automated options. So I agree. Having something like a reform that outlines all of those
Yeah,
impact items would be helpful.
So what we were looking at, this year is this winter, we're looking to implement a townwide roadside mowing program. So start with our plow routes, looking at our main streets, start blowing everything back. Loppers, chainsaws, yeah. So the idea is in the future, we won't have to do that. Now we just have to maintain it. That's where that machine would come into play. So now it has a boom mower, so now we don't have to go out and cut down trees and brush and lop them out. Now we can maintain the edges of the roadway. So that's what's on our radar, that's what's coming up. So if the weather holds true, we'll be implementing that project.
No, a lot of people have talked about it. A lot of people said they see a lot more work being done on the sides of the roads, cleaning up the branches, so it's good.
I mean, we're gonna
We
even.
expect it.
Yeah,
We
we're
should
gonna,
be
go-
doing
we're
it.
gonna go to the actually efforts too is, you know, a lot of the road salt sand is built up on the sides of the road over time. We're actually gonna be removing some of that as well too and leveling out the edge of roadways. So it's gonna be, you know, it's gonna be a meticulous process. It's gonna be one road at a time. And the idea is just to march through town as long as it takes to set us up for maintenance in the future.
Very good.
How are we as far as plow drivers for this winter? Good shape, or?
How about those Red Sox? No, we're doing good. We actually, it's this time of the year, we can't even get to talk to these contractors because there's so much work out there that they're busy that they just can't come in. They don't know if they can have plow drivers in the seats of their trucks. But this year, I think we're going to be probably better if we were to measure the last few years because the contractors are starting to respond to us. But I mean, this work starts in September.
Yeah.
You know, we start to talk to these guys and you hear click. I mean, nobody wants to talk snow. But once you start getting around Thanksgiving, we get commitments and signed contracts and stuff like that. But we also hire drivers to come in and man some of our trucks that are sitting unmanned and shovelers as well, you know, for snow blowing and sidewalk clearing and stuff like that. So we're trying to hustle up that business. It's not a debatable rate thing. It's a rate that we approve, so they come in and they work by our rate, so it's no surprise to us. This year, we didn't go up on the rates at all, other than the cost of living, which you would expect possibly, you know, that everybody gets, but it's like 1.5% or something like that.
Thanks, Bob.
You bet.
All right. Anything else, gentlemen?
I'm good.
No? Well, thank you once again for coming in and walking everybody through this incredibly insightful information. And thank you once again for all the work that you do to keep us running. We know that we ask you to feed the mountainside with a fish and 2 loaves of bread, and you consistently do it year after year. So thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Barry.
All right. Our next item this evening is to please consider appointing Timothy Martin to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Blythe.
Yes, Mr. Martin sent in his application last week. I think if you'd like to come up, Mr. Martin, and sit at the microphone. His application is in your packet, and he's here to have a dialogue with you about his background and the needs of the ZBA.
Welcome, Mr. Martin.
Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you so much for your interest. We really do appreciate it. If you wouldn't mind starting by just talking a little about yourself and your interest in the board.
Sure. First of all, thanks again for having me tonight. My name's Timothy Martin. I hate to turn my back to the audience and the TV people, too. I've been in town about 15 years now. My background is really real estate related in all facets. Many years ago, I started as a title examiner down at the Registry of Deeds. And if you can spend years reading deeds, easements, and putting all that together, you really have a boring life. But I found it quite interesting to get that background. It was a good basis for me. From there, I went on to law school in the evening while I worked doing title exams. When I finished and got through law school, passed the bar exam, I opened my own law firm in Boston and out in Walpole. Practiced law full-time for over 10 years. During that time, I was mostly engaged in real estate-related matters, land use, zoning, permitting, conveyancing, that type of thing. After that, I pursued a corporate career. I went into corporate real estate for Boston Gas, Keyspin Energy, and National Grid. I did that for 5 years, and after that, and where I am today, I'm doing commercial lending. Commercial real estate lending for the past 15 years. And what that really entails is that I'm the person that pulls together requests for financing deals, and part of that, it's a lot more than just numbers and cash flow. It's the details of the transaction. It's the zoning. It's the appraisal. It's a lot that goes to it, so that when I make a recommendation and fund a deal or a transaction, I have to sit in a room with the loan committee, and they're going to stare me down at that when I make my recommendation, and they're going to hold my feet to the fire if that deal falls apart at some point throughout the life of that loan. So my background is really a lot of detailed research, which I enjoy, and that gives me a full, I think, a good, it doesn't make me a zoning expert, but I don't know too many people that are zoning experts. But what it does for me is it makes me appreciate zoning and the impact of it. Zoning impacts the town. When you drive into any town, you see the culture, you see what goes on by, really a lot of it is dictated by zoning. We don't think about it, but it really is. Zoning impacts corporations, your neighbor, yourself, everything, the downtown area. So I've always been involved with those types of things, and that's what drove me here tonight. To balance it all off, when someone comes before the ZBA, it could be typically a contested issue. the folks that appear, they might have already been aggrieved by a decision, so they've already got a lot of angst in front of them, and they come in with a lot at stake. Their property rights are paramount, and on the ZBA, you've got to look at those property rights and make sure you don't step out of bounds to squash those property rights. At the same time, you have to work within the zoning bylaw of what the town's adopted. Those rules you can't change. They're given to you. That's what the town's placed with you. So you're not a town planner, but you have to look at the legal side and the zoning side and put it all together and get the information from the applicants. And you're going to listen to abutters and their concerns. But once you get all those facts, put them all together, apply the law and the zoning bylaw, I think if you draft your decisions properly, even those folks who really aren't thrilled with the outcome of the decision, they can appreciate it because they'll understand it better. So my motivation for being considered for this role is really to help the people of the town. It's a way that I think I could serve the town, that I could volunteer my time in an area that I fully enjoy and I really appreciate and have some understanding of zoning and the impact on individuals, corporations, and that's why I'm here tonight, so thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Chris, any questions?
No, I met Tim years ago. I think it was when they were building out Fernwood Estates or whatever. and
Fernwood Estates, right.
We were trying to figure out what a corner looked like, and
Adjacent and abutting.
that's right.
We had
What
a lot
was
of
the
discussion on that.
definition? And then we obviously, we butted heads about your apartment building you owned on
Yeah.
Rockwood Road, where you did a lot of research. And I still remember the 95-year-old woman audio tape.
She's doing well today.
And so yes, Tim has been before the zoning board in two different capacities, and did a good job at presenting his cases in both situations. And I think we lost Bob Luciano this last year. He moved out of town, and Medora Champagne is no longer on the board. So I think Tim would make a good addition with his legal background and his banking background, as well as his personal understanding of zoning and how it affects people and what has to go into it, to be a great associate member.
Very good. Well, far be it from me to contest that endorsement.
What you did last time.
I said that endorsement.
Oh, okay.
So with that, I would move that the board appoint Mr. Timothy Martin to the Zoning Board of Appeals as an associate member for the term to expire June 30th, 2020. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations, sir. Thank you
Very
again.
much. Thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow night.
Okay,
Make
great.
sure you get sworn in tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had to throw that in.
I know you did. It's okay.
You set yourself up.
Our next item tonight is to please consider appointing the new parking clerk.
Yes, thank you. So typically, in the past, one of the duties of our office, Town Administrator's Office, is to have one of the executive assistants performing the role as parking clerk. And that role, I've included the section of the state law about this in your packet. The most part, since we do not have a lot of we don't have parking meters, and really it's more just parking in incorrect places in town where people shouldn't be. We don't have a lot of actual parking tickets, but they are issued, and per state law, it can't be someone in the police department performing that task. It most recently has been Sue Jacobson, but as you know, she has moved downstairs back to the affordable housing role, so it's really not conducive to have her continue this work. And Carol Green, our town clerk, has stepped forward and interested in doing this. I'm pleased that Carol is interested in being the type of town clerk who handles a lot of business for residents, kind of as a one-stop shop. I think she has a good understanding of the requirements of it, and can handle the processing of these very, very easily. And on the odd occasion where there would be a hearing required, she could take care of that too. So our first suggestion would have been to appoint Nancy to the role, but given that Carol's interested in doing it, and if you poll other town clerks, a number of them in small communities, it tends to be the town clerk's office, I would recommend her for that, and she's interested in serving. So you'll see Sue's resignation in the packet, and so we would simply be appointing Carol until the next cycle, and then it would just stay on that next cycle going forward.
So that term would expire June 2020?
Yes.
June 30th, 2020?
Yep.
Okay. Chris, do you have any questions, comments, concerns? No? All right, with that, I would move that the board accept the resignation of Susan Jacobson from the position of parking clerk and appoint Miss Carol Green to the position of parking clerk for a term to expire June 30th, 2020.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations, Carol. Mhm. Congratulations. Condolences, which one?
Congratulations.
Congratulations, okay.
We hope no one needs a parking ticket. That's what we would actually prefer.
Do we know how many we gave out last year?
The police department is in the back row. Don't know if they have that factoid off the top of their head. I don't believe I have that up. I'm less than 100, probably, I'm guessing.
More when we did over here.
When there were some issues on Liberty Lane, there were more, but I've seen a couple in my last few months, but I don't see all the mail every day, but I have not a lot.
All right, our next item tonight is to please consider signing a DPW grievance settlement.
So I'm going to ask, and Scott's already beat me to the punch, already coming to the microphone. I'm going to turn over to him for the background on this.
Welcome, Mr. Bragdon. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
So I'm in the probably unique for me situation of asking you to approve a settlement on a grievance where I think the facts of the grievance are incorrect, and I'll talk about that. Basically, there's been a change in management in the DPW union. They've gone back and the original negotiating team from a year ago says, oh, we don't remember negotiating this wording, it has to be changed. That wording was in the first draft and every subsequent draft that we worked with them on. So why am I here asking to settle a grievance? Two reasons. One is that short term, the reason for making this change, the reason we were doing it was to try to bring some consistency to some of the wording in the various contracts and with the non-union employees. That's our desire. The actual cost of signing this grievance would save the town a little bit of money. Not significant, but a few weeks of pay for a few people because increased vacation on an anniversary date, 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, gets delayed a year under the old wording, so that would go out the window. The other and main reason, and Todd and I have talked about this, is that there's currently, there have been a number of grievances and an arbitration planned with the clerical union on very similar language. So that's up in the air. So it's my recommendation that we go back to the wording of the contract we had in the previous time, which is what is in the agreement. We pull out the paying the anniversary extra vacation until the following year, which is what was in the old one, and then we renegotiate in the next contract, and we see where these other arbitrations go.
Thank you. Chris, questions?
And I just thought of this one was, is their vacation methodology different from other unions that we have in town? Or do we do each one in a different, are they all the same? It's the police, fire, non-clerical, clerical, highway department?
Yeah.
Do they all have the same basic vacation program, or do we have
No.
5 different ones?
To some extent.
Why don't we have the
Well,
same?
because you start every year with a baseline of a contract and negotiate against that. So we try to change that. So a number of years ago, when I first started, we changed the wording in the clerical contract to what we had changed the non-union employees to. That's what's being grieved at the moment with the arbitration. And the starting place for every one of those other contracts is in a very different place. So what is important to us as we look at each contract varies every year. And so there is some differences. The amounts of vacation is similar. I think there's one contract where there's sort of, it can get much higher. The rest of them are similar in the number of weeks that people get, but the wording is different in the various contracts.
I think there are components of contracts where you very much want uniformity from one to the next. I mean, I think what I hear Scott saying is generally the amount of time that people earn is fairly much the same. Some of the details about exactly how it's worked out, I think, are different amongst all of them. I know, Scott, you've done you've spreadsheeted all the comparison of all the contracts, and we can get you that. That may be helpful.
Yeah.
But on this, where it's actually because of the timing that will work out, some employees may actually earn less because of going back to the old language. That's not a bad thing for the town. I think it's worth settling.
Yeah, and going to your original point, I'd love to have the same policy everywhere. It's terrific. But when you look at what your priorities are and what you're looking to get for what you're giving every year, that may not be the top of the list, particularly if it doesn't really get you anything. There are other things we got. And, you know, for instance, the police contract, while they got a good contract themselves, we got some significant things for the town and protections that I think will work in the long run for us.
Okay.
No questions from my end. So with that, I would move that the board authorize a settlement agreement and release with the Norfolk Highway Department Employees Union regarding Article 13, Section 2 vacation wording.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Scott.
No problem.
All right, next item this evening is to please consider executing proclamations for Eagle Scouts.
So there's an upcoming Eagle Court of Honor this weekend that Mr. Weeder is going to, on behalf of the board, for 4 scouts who are earning that rank. And it's been the town's practice to put together a proclamation, like you see in your packet, that gives an outline of what each of the scouts have done. So thanks to Judith, those have all been prepared with that information we received this year. And so we're looking for the board to proclaim a day for each of the scouts. And we picked it's in alphabetical order by last name, starting with the day after the actual Court of Honor, and ask you then to execute these at the end of the meeting. So he can take these with him to the presentation this weekend.
Very good. Chris, since you're attending, would you like to make the motion?
Make a motion to approve the proclamations for the 4 individuals receiving Eagle Scouts.
We want to highlight their names.
We can do that. I know you're trying to get back to me for that last.
Oh, you got
comment.
many more coming. Don't worry.
Don't worry.
You got many more coming.
Don't worry, it's a long night, though. Don't you worry, it's a long night. Move the board to proclaim the town of Norfolk October 21st for Jack Sebastian Calentro, October 21, October 22, John Charles Norberg, October 23, Brandon Douglas O'Neill, and October 24th, Matthew Joseph Stetter. I will have to get their names properly by Sunday.
A second. Any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations, gentlemen. Thank you.
Yes.
Next item tonight is to please consider approval of the Heather's Hungry Turkey Trot on November 28th, 2019.
What would Thanksgiving be without a road race? And so this is Heather's Hungry Turkey Trot. The race course outline is in your packet. They're expecting about 100 people, and it would start at 8 a.m. It's a 5K. They're providing us with insurance, and they are going to, no issues really that any of the departments have brought up. DPW has offered to inspect the route and leave some barrels and cones out to help facilitate the day. They'll start early and end, I think, fairly quickly in time for everyone to get home for other festivities, so we recommend approval.
Good. Chris, comments, concerns?
Nope, I think it's great.
Good. I can't think of anything I'd rather do than run on Thanksgiving morning. You going to be there?
I will be there.
I would move that the board approve a request to hold a turkey trot road race on Thursday, November 28th, 2019.
Second the motion.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, our first discussion item this evening is going to be discussing the funding for Norfolk's 150th anniversary parade.
So, Mr. Paul Terrio, who's in the audience, come up to the microphone, reached out to us a month or two ago and indicated his strong interest in having a 150th anniversary parade and being the organizer of said parade.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome. Thank you for volunteering.
Thank you. Well, I haven't totally thrown myself behind this yet because I'm not quite sure I understand where we're going with it. But, yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to take on the task of heading up a parade for the 150th anniversary. If you look at what we did in the past, Betsy Pine had given me this book here, and I sent the material to you folks. Did you pass it out? Okay. So I think the parade on the 100th was 2 to 3 hours long. It started at like 11 and ended up at 2-ish. So there was 3.5 to 4 pages of participants and bands. There was 4 days of activities. It was on Memorial Day weekend, and we initially talked about when this would be planned for, and I just came up with a date of the weekend after Labor Day. So I guess my purpose for being here is to understand what you folks want. What's the town want? What's the input? Because it will take some funding.
Yeah.
It'll take a lot of logistics support, public safety, transportation, food and refreshments, things of that nature. So.
Very good. Blythe, did you do any kind of research or outreach to identify with the Historical Commission what the scope and idea of
Certainly
what that was like?
looped Betsy Pine as the chair into the conversation. She's focused, her energy is a little bit more on the dinner that's going to be in May, and there is a small amount of money in the Historical Commission operating budget this year to facilitate that event. But at this point, there's been no funding put aside for a parade, and so I think part of what Paul's looking to find out is, you know, what would you as the leaders of the town envision having? Is there an appetite to putting aside some money at some point for that, or fundraising, or some combination?
I think really more importantly, though, to what degree do you want to celebrate this milestone anniversary? Do you want a 15-minute parade? Do you want an hour's parade? Do you want a 2-hour parade? And then when we understand that, then it's a matter of kind of backfilling in with the funding mechanisms, whether the businesses in the towns will step up, and maybe we could set up with, you know, Todd's help, a funding account where they can make contributions. Just thoughts off the top of my head.
Well, I do have to admit that the scope and scale of parade for certain events is really somewhere outside of my realm of understanding. In retrospect, our parades that we've held in the previous years for Memorial Day are about, what, 20 to 30 minutes?
Well, yeah, maybe an hour
An
when you
hour?
take in all the activities, right?
Okay.
Yeah, the route for something like this, and I just kind of drew up a diagram that I shared with you folks, and, you know, my thoughts were you'd stage it at the Freeman Kennedy, come out the driveway, take a left, go down towards the center of town, take a right, up towards Town Hall, around the library, come back around in front of the Federated Church, and then terminate down next to Dunkin' Donuts into the train parking lot there. So that's a 1.1 mile, 1.2 mile. The other alternative is to go up Boardman Street and then come down Main Street over the train tracks and then loop around through here and then terminate down. You know, the one factor that needs to be heavily considered, whereas in the 70s, we didn't have the same train schedule that we have in today's world, and we only had a single track that we were working with, and now we have makings of 2 tracks in town. So,
Chris, do you have any thoughts or insight into
I mean,
your
I think-
expectation?
You know, I was surprised. I talked to Donna Jones today, and it was, you know, she said they're really hasn't been a lot of planning. There's a little bit with regard to the dinner, but we haven't really, I hate to say it, we probably haven't done a good job as a town of deciding if we want to celebrate this 150th and how we want to celebrate it. And it's September, October. It's coming up real quick. So I think, yeah, we do have to make a decision, and I think a parade's a great idea. I mean, the Memorial Day Parade seemed to be extremely well-received this year. You seem to have I think, for the old and for the young. I mean, the old like it for the nostalgia. I mean, you see some of the pictures where you had Mr. Holmes and some of the other selectmen from years ago in the old antique cars that the older people appreciate, and the younger people coming into town, kids love a parade. I mean, I think every one of us can remember a parade we went to as a kid.
Yeah.
I'm sure, if they had it. I used to go to the Needham Parade. It was, they had vendors, everything. Everybody loved it. So I think a parade's a great idea. I just, I think that we're going to have to get the funding in order very quickly, for it to happen, because we've got to get police, obviously the police involved. We've got to get vendors signed up.
Fire, rescue.
You got to get people organized. I mean, so it's a lot of work. So
That's a lot of work.
I think it's a great idea. I just think, is it what people want? I would like it. I guess the question would be, is it something the town really, do the people in town would look forward to it? I think they would. I think the people in town might rally for a parade. It'd be a nice way to celebrate the 150th.
Yeah.
Chuck was probably the only one here for the 100th, right? See that? It was 2 hours long? Was it good?
It was good.
Was it well received, or?
Oh, that was the 125th, that was also good.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's a milestone anniversary,
yeah.
you know.
I mean,
It's
most of
one of
us-
the larger ones because it,
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's a great idea, if we can pull it off. I think we just need to get it organized quickly, because I think that's the problem. I think Paul's made a good point. We gotta get moving on this if we're gonna do it.
yeah, I mean, it is a matter of reaching out, for participants, and I think that's probably the longest thing. And, the other thing, and I mean, from an organizational standpoint, yeah, I've been involved with the Lions for approximately 25 years. And I've organized a lot of events for the Lions Club, but I've also organized the last 2 air shows for the town of Norfolk, and those were well received as well. But the planning that went into that, the time was significant. So if we, arbitrarily pick a date into September, everybody's back from vacation, for the most part. Weather's generally pretty good the first to second week in September. Gives us enough time to start scoping things out.
So in terms of funding, given that if it happens in September, it's something that we could put in the FY21 budget, which would be available in July. I don't know
Yeah.
how far in advance money would be needed, but, whether it's the town's funding the whole thing, or there's some partial town funding and a kind of a challenge out to the community, hey, can, contributions, donations, I don't know what you'd like to do, but I mean, if that timing works, then that's something where we get the word out and get people to debate it before it comes up as part of the budget.
Yeah. The other thing that the town put on for the 100th is they also had firemen's muster, and they also did fireworks, which are, again, logistics and monies and stuff like that. And I'm sure that there was, people donated monies on those behalf, businesses in the town. What I can do is, and maybe with the help of you folks, is, I'll reach out to Carol Green and see what she's got, if there's any budgetary numbers from back then, what they did back then. Where did that money come from?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Sourcing as opposed to
Right.
value, right? Yeah.
yeah, so,
Or we can put it on the website to ask businesses, would they be willing to contribute, how much? Get them to put a deposit in.
Or anyone, if some
Right,
people
anybody
want
wants
to
to
celebrate our
contribute.
anniversary, would you
Get it
like?
going now, say who would like to participate. And then if we want to put some seed money in as the town to start, we can decide for whether we do that this fall or if we do that in the spring.
Right, well, I guess the question I would have back to Paul is when would you need funds? Is it needed now? Is it needed,
oh, no, I don't think I'd need funds now at all. I mean, I think.
would it be too late if
I
it was
think,
July
you know,
1st?
What I need to understand, and I don't have a solid understanding yet, is a lot of these groups, bands and whatnot, who pays for them to get here? When they get here, what do you do for them? Do you feed them and water them? Those type of understandings. Do you make a donation to them? I don't have that. I don't have that knowledge yet.
Well, it sounds like we'd all be learning that together.
Yeah.
Got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. But I think what we did come to a consensus here, at least, with is that this is something that we'd like to pursue. This is something that we view as important for the community. I'm not sure if we're necessarily nailed down on the scope of the event itself, but I think we're aligned on.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, and maybe Todd, you can help us out. Help me out. Can the town set up a fund for volunteers to, businesses to contribute money? They can do that? Okay. So, and maybe I can start working on the backside and seeing who, business-wise, who would be willing to contribute on that level and pulling some people together.
And develop a budget, what do you,
Yeah,
like
try
you
to-
said,
yeah, yeah.
what are you gonna need, what are we gonna need
Yeah.
money for as a town?
Yeah.
I don't know if the police have to pay
Yeah.
details to do these, or do they volunteer it? I have no idea.
You probably gonna do some volunteers, but you probably have to pay a lot.
Yeah.
And you're gonna have to have paramedics.
Right.
Also, which is
Yeah.
gonna be more than the regular shift.
Right.
And that's what I had put down here, town participation, where does, when you have to pay for police and fire and rescue and whatnot, where does that money come from?
Yeah.
Is that out of a budget fund, or is that just out of the general funds?
Right. Mr. Alex, go right ahead, sir. Just please grab a microphone.
Along with Chuck, I was here for that 100th. My motorcycle beat your motorcycle, remember that? We used to have a moonscape out here. Now it's green, still flat, not being used. Do you think any way that we could possibly use that for a day? It would be a great place for vendors to set up. And the last time we had it, the whole town was closed off. And to get into town, you had to be bused. So is it possible to charge per person on the busing, which would get us some of the bucks back again? All the parking was well out of town. There wasn't a vehicle anywhere in town.
Well, the green space in town center is private property, right? So
I'm not exactly sure what he's referring to.
you're talking.
Yeah, right across from the pharmacy.
Right, so the green area that runs
Okay,
along
yeah.
Main Street, yeah. So that's private property,
So we have to get permission to use that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We'd
Yep.
probably have to take out a one-day insurance on it, too, at the same time. But, maybe the
That's fairly
supermarket would
straightforward.
like to do something where they've screwed us up so many years,
Sounds like you got an assistant, Paul.
More than happy.
There you go. First committee member done.
That's right.
Yeah. Committee of 2. 3.
Any other comments, questions? Donna, go right ahead.
Sorry to be coming in mid-subject. I was downstairs with the Historical Commission, who just reviewed what they're doing for their May 15th, 2020 Time Traveler's Birthday Party, a dinner at the middle school. So the money they requested is to print invitations, to mail the invitations, to have money to pay for the food that they'll probably get from a grocery store. We're going to have to pay for a cafeteria worker, the janitorial service for that day. They're charging per ticket for meals, and that might not pay back they might not need to spend the $2,500, and they hope the dinner fee will pay it back, what they do spend. They're planning talks at the library. That's all they're coordinating right now. I did happen to grab one of the notebooks that's labeled Norfolk at 100 from 1970, which is full of lots of camera can't see, but pictures from the parade and celebration we had. So we've had blasts in the past in 1970 and 1995. There's lots of things we have done before. I don't know if one option was fireworks that I mentioned to the police and fire departments, and they said, yeah, I remember that was great when we had it at the Boardman Street School. Let's do it there again. Just wondered how to get money for that and who pays the insurance.
Well, I think what we've determined here is that we would like to explore what this looks like. I don't think we've determined what the scope is, but I think we have enough to be able to at least do the beginnings of some workings and research to understand more about what the effort looks like.
I'll start putting some things together.
Okay. Very good. And then once we have some generalizations or some numbers put to that, we can discuss more about what that scope and what that cost looks like and how we could fund it from
Yeah.
the various sources. As we go into our next meeting, we're going to be getting really into meeting prep. So when do you think would be a good time to circle up once again? After Fall Town meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
When's fall town meeting?
The 19th of November?
Okay.
Which would place our next scheduled meeting.
So that puts us into the 3rd of December? Oh, no. When would the next Board of Selectmen?
That would
Yeah,
be
first.
the 3rd of December is correct.
The what, the 3rd of December? Okay. We'll start pulling some stuff together.
Thank you once again for volunteering.
All right.
Or at least showing interest in volunteering
Sure.
to be determined at a later date.
Better word. See what we can figure out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Donna.
Thanks.
All right, our next item this evening is to please discuss the draft special town meeting warrant and various articles.
Yes, so in your packet are several items, the first of which is the draft of the warrant. It largely follows the style and layout of previous town meeting warrants. And the order has been the order I put them in, not necessarily the order you necessarily want them in at the end of the day. So that's a discussion point. The first up through item number 18 are dollar monies for various items that we have on the list, and followed by some general bylaw changes, and then Articles 19 through the end are zoning bylaw changes and street acceptances as it's written today. In the audience with us tonight is our IT Director, Tan, and the Chief and Deputy Chief from Police, and Scott and Todd. They're here specifically at your request to, for any questions that you have about items on the warrant that are dollars to be spent in their specific departments or as part of their specific departments. And anyone who's not here tonight will be here on the 29th to talk about theirs as well. We want to make sure we got all your questions answered that maybe haven't been through the background you've already received. So I'd suggest we start with that, and then we can get into some of the details about the order of the warrant or any articles you have a particular question or concern about. This has been reviewed by Town Council, and he has made some edits. I'd say the one major area that we're still working on is what right now we're calling Article 20, which is the B1 zoning district. It's actually written to be multiple articles, and there's still discussion going on about whether or not it should be one article to address the whole zone concept with perhaps multiple motions to deal with different components, or it's every section of this is dealt with in a different article. So we're still working through those details, but I say generally, everything before that has already been reviewed and is in fairly final form.
And the planning board will be holding their public hearing for that on the 28th, right before our next
That's
meeting,
correct,
right?
and they're urging people to come to that and invited you as well, so that they can have the full measure of people's thoughts on it before they finalize it, because obviously, once the warrant's done, our next step is to get the motions finalized so that we can have the moderators meeting in conjunction with ours on November 5th.
Very good. Chris, do you have a list of questions that you'd like to start with?
I guess we have to go to the police radios and the police cruiser.
He waited for you to leave the room before he brought it up.
He knew I was going to bring it up. As soon as he heard about the tractor, he said, "Oh, geez, here he goes." Huh? Oh, you missed it? Oh.
What was it?
The radios.
Oh.
Can you explain that to us? And I guess my first question, I'm going to ask a silly question, is I drive up to the new police station, and there's like 12 or 13 cruisers sitting out in the driveway. And my first question is, why aren't they in the Sally port? So that's one question. My second question is, do we need 35 radios if I only have 4 cruisers out on the road? And are those the same 4 cruisers that are on the road every single shift?
No, they
So
are
it's
not.
more just understanding a little bit about how it all works. And it's not something we walk around asking you, hey, tell me about your cruisers, but this is now the opportunity to do that.
Okay. When we were fortunate enough to get new cars, every year, we were able to spread out the mileage amongst the cars, and we assigned cars to a group of officers. And as we found that program, the cars last longer and they maintained better. So the cars we have out there, the first two years, those cars probably drive all 3 shifts. And then as they start to age, we drop them down to maybe 2 shifts. And in the last year of the 5 or 6 year cycle, they probably only drive 1 shift. But by then, they get well over 100,000 miles on them. They've been operated for how many hours are on an engine, but we're always told between 3 and 4 times what the mileage is how many hours. So that's that part of it. But you were asking about portables.
Yeah, the radios, right? The radios are saying 35 radios for its full-time special.
Okay,
And you want to replace them, I gather.
So
And
the
it's
same
about
argument goes
$3,000.
for the radios, Chris,
Yeah.
is when you issue a radio to somebody,
Yeah, we can't hear what you're saying.
how much closer do I get? So when we issue a radio to each person, and they keep it, and they're the only one who uses it, and it lasts longer, it's always maintained, is accountability. So the same thing with the cruises, there's always accountability for its wear, its maintenance.
So the radios are with a person.
The radios go for each person, yes.
They're not with the vehicles.
Yeah, because you never know when you're going to get called in, and if you only have 4 to issue, that's not enough. You have 8 to issue, that's not enough, because you're going from shift to shift, or if you have an event. So, that's not enough radios to get by. So, the power of the radios that everybody needs to understand is we're talking about interoperability with other towns. So they're going to the digital format. And we've been on analog for a number of years, but now the towns around us are all going to digital, and we need to be able to communicate with them. And we're not, right now, we can't. So if something happened in our community, or we need to go to another community, we wouldn't be able to talk to them by radio, so.
And is this a wish, or is this something we need to do like right away this year? Or is this, 'cause
Well, we have asked for the last couple, right, Todd, for these radios, and there were other needs
Yep.
that we said, okay, but we're gonna eventually you got to pay the piper. So, and now that more of the towns that surround us have gone to a digital format, we need to go to that also. So,
I think you said we're the only ones around here who don't have a digital
Right.
format. So
yeah.
Rentham, Millis, Roxborough, all are digital, Franklin.
All of it digital capable. So,
In terms of managing our limited resources, I've talked with the chief about replacing some of the radios this year and some of them next. And not, I mean, while it would be ideal to replace them all at the same time, replacing them over 2 years is so at least we can get out of circulation the ones that just don't work anymore and get new ones in, and then the balance of ones for maybe the reserve officers and the spares are we get in the second year. So that, I mean, the goal is safety for our officers when they're out on a call. We had a situation just this summer where officers dealing with a very out of control person and can't call for help because the radio doesn't work.
and that was the second radio he had gone off of the rack to get, and he tried it a bunch of times and it didn't work. He went to the second radio and he got it to make a noise, took it out in the road, and then when he had the call and needed it to work, it did not. And that could have been a dangerous situation for the officer and anybody else involved. So one of the things why we said we needed to go to the digital portables first, because every time we replace a car over the last couple of years, we've gone to a mobile that's digital capable, but the other ones that we have are analog. So we're going to do that as a. But if the digital goes with the officer, each officer, so they can talk, and they if you're stationary or static with the mobile, but with a portable, you can be anywhere out in the woods. You could be up the street, away from your car, and you can always communicate. So that's why the portables to me are more important. So.
Stupid question. Do we introduce any kind of roadblocks by only doing half of them and leaving the other half?
There's possibility that there's a software change in between years, and we might end up with 2 versions. But, you know, it's an awful lot of money to replace all of them at one time. I initially had suggested that we do it over 3 years and talked about it further and said it would be smart to at least get the core group, half of them, the first year, and waiting 1 year, the chief and the deputy feel is reasonable accommodation.
Scott?
I just want to mention that in the last contract negotiated the ability to use GPS with police officers. These new radios have GPS capability, which means that if an officer is in the woods, if an officer is unfortunately down, we can find him. We can't do that with the current radios. So from my point of view, that's big.
Was that I'm sorry to make you walk all the way back and ask you a question, but was that the intent of the radio purchase, was the GPS functionality? That was the intent of the piece of the contract, was to utilize radios for that?
I'm the HR director, so it was critical for me. But Chuck has a lot of other reasons, the compatibility, the communications with the mech, et cetera. But
Yeah,
from
but
my
when,
point,
when we put that into the contract, was the intent for us to purchase these radios to be able to have that functionality, or was
That's-
it for something else?
no, it was
Okay.
for these radios.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'll wait till you get back to ask you another one. I'm just,
And the MEC can talk to them through these, they probably can talk to them
They
through
can talk to
analog
us.
now.
They can talk to us now, and yeah, their equipment is all brand new. So, and they've had to make that provision for the MEC for the other towns that are already digital capable. So,
Okay. That's all I have on that one.
okay.
And on the cruiser, so do you have 15 cruisers right now?
we have 15. Yes,
We have 2 motorcycles,
yes, we do.
and that's all we have for cruisers? That's total, the ones out in everywhere in town, cruisers, right?
Well, you have some aged ones that other departments are
No,
using.
not those ones. I don't want to count those ones.
What are we
I'm
talking
just
about?
asking, do we have 15 in
We
total?
have 15 marked or unmarked cars, yes, and 2 motorcycles, yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then we have a couple of Hummers and some other stuff.
Yeah, and those, yeah, one works pretty good, but yes, that's because these cars no longer go off-road.
Yeah.
The older versions were higher,
Right.
and then you could go off-road and look for somebody if you had to, and as you can guess, we still have some rural areas and some off-road areas where we'd have to go out, and those things are incredible in the snow, and they're incredible for going over rough terrain.
Okay. And I understand that, we have to, I guess, and again, Andy Pazinowski was the one who educated me in this, and that is that a cruiser with 100,000 miles, yes, is equivalent to a car of 400,000 miles.
Right.
And that keeping cruisers on the road after 120,000 miles is not efficient in this day and age.
Yeah, and part of the thing, the car that we're replacing now is a 2008, and it's got 166,000 miles on it. So it's 11 years old. It's aged, and you know, if your frontline cars, as you phase them out, your frontline cars to the second year line car, the third line car, those are the ones that we want to be able to go out, have them start, and get to your medical emergency or other emergency at your home, because if it's a medical emergency and it's a breathing or a heart problem, you got less than 4 minutes from the time of the time that you get out, not necessarily the time that we got the call. So if we're out there messing around with a battery pack, trying to get the car started, or we have to go in and grab another set of keys because that one's just not working, it doesn't do it, you know, that's wasted time that we can't afford to do that because we're in the public safety business.
Right.
It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
I agree. Are we keeping these all inside now? Because I do see all these ones outside.
And I heard you say that earlier, and no, they each has a spot outside. When they're on duty, one of the things that I've always said at town meeting is we run them 24/7.
Right.
Well, this year, for the first time
don't have to.
since I started working, we won't have to. We're going to be able to put the ones that are on shift inside and keep them from having snow fall on them, icing up, and all of those things.
What about the off-shift ones?
The off-shift ones,
The outside still?
Can't
Can't
most,
fit them all inside?
yes, we can, but it's not convenient for normal operations. I mean, when you think about, we have an arrest, we bring them in through the Sally Port, the back door of that station, and we bring them in, then bring them in through the booking area. To have all those cars in there, it's tight, very tight. So, but we want to get them.
Just built your new police station. It better not be tight.
Well, Chris.
I have a problem with that. Yeah, I mean, I just think leaving the cars outside is just, it seems, and I know this was the big issue, was the cars down there were all sitting outside, so they had to run all the time to make sure they were always accessible. Now I see them sitting outside. I said, I have this huge Sally Port, and I've got all these vehicles sitting outside. They're getting beat by the sun. The interiors are getting beat by the sun. It is not conducive to the tires. I mean, it's much better if they were sitting in this controlled environment. And I just think I think they're aging faster by sitting out there. So I don't know how we work around this, but I just think it's an optics thing as well as to me from owning vehicles, as you know, all my cars are inside, for a reason, and they all have dehumidifiers because that's the only way they're going to last.
And part of that is because you're going to keep your car for a very long time.
Yes,
It's more of an antique. And we try not to go into the antique business.
I want you guys to get into the antique business because you never know what the future's going to bring, right?
I think I'd like to point out, and I forgot to put this in my background, the next model year will be a hybrid, which is
That's my next question.
hybrid. That's what the next.
They're now selling for the police use.
So over time, as we replace vehicles, our use of energy will should go down because we're using a different type of system than we've used in the past. So,
which is a great goal to have. Now, one of the things that we used to have, well, back in like 2005 or 6, we had what they called a vehicle replacement program, and I know you were in town for that. And we were supposed to get 2 cars every year for the first 4 years, and on the 5th year we would get 3. So we didn't keep those cars beyond 100,000 miles. Well, some of the other communities around here, because they're emergency vehicles, that they consider them public safety emergency vehicles, they actually replace them a lot faster so that they're all safe. Because the first couple of years, you're only doing, pads, maybe some rotors, some tires. What we find is around 50, 60,000, you're doing ball joints and some tie rod end type things for the front end. After that, after the 3 to 4 years in emergency service work, we're out there in all weather, and that's the problem. The windshield wipers are going all the time. The electrical systems are going all the time. That stuff wears out faster, the heaters, the air conditioner, whatever you need. And then all of this stuff that drains off of the electrical equipment that we run in the car. So it just does not last as long as your personal car might or mine.
Are we taking these cars out of service now? repurposing them in other departments.
We're going to have that conversation.
Okay.
Well, that's one of the
Going to
things.
have that before we buy this new vehicle, so we make sure that's done?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I mean, once they leave us,
That's not your problem, I know.
but because, there are needs in the town, I understand that people need a car. And they've asked me for 26 years now as the chief, what are you going to do with that car? Is it any good? And I go up and talk to Paul Vito at the time, now Charlie, and he goes, oh, can we keep this going so they can use it to do whatever? And that's up to you guys after that, because
Well, the board in 2018 passed a vehicle replacement policy as part of applying for green communities. And so, as I said earlier, if that 2008 vehicle can't meet the MPG requirements of being a green community, you can't downcycle it. So then the question becomes, how do we get those facilities people around to all the places they need to go? What's the best way to do that? And we'll have to, the conversation has to change.
which is good. It's time. As far as the green program goes, it's time.
And I would just like to, I know it has nothing to do with your capital purchase, try to find a better way to get these vehicles inside, because I think that's a real frustrating thing when you go up there and see 12 vehicles sitting in the parking lot, and you go, I just have this brand-new building, and I was told everything was gonna be inside, and I see them all sitting out there.
Oh, I don't know that I ever said that everything was going to be inside.
You didn't say it,
They were
but-
going to be inside during a snow event.
I think I'd just like to see more of them inside than outside, just
Okay,
for
we'll
proper maintenance of them and keeping them for the 3 to 5 years. We
put
hope
that
to
into
have.
the consideration. How's that?
All right. That's all I have.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Okay, yep.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
Any questions for Ton or for Scott, who are,
I was going to say, Ton, if you wouldn't mind coming up and talking to us about the replacement program that you've outlined here, that'd be beneficial. Rarely do I get to exercise my area of expertise in technology, so I'm excited for this.
So I'm on the hot seat now. I believe this is the first time that technology has put a plan like this together, because all along with basically there's a certain budget, and we plead and beg and oftentimes get grants and apply for grants, and we got on the back end that way. And a lot of the purchase of new equipment, it's kind of get it working. And oftentimes when you just get things working, one of the things that you forego is the actual compliance of licensing. So based on that and the number of equipment that we have about 95 computers in the whole town. And I just do a 5 years refresh program. So every year we just change out 15 sets of computer monitors, and at the same time purchase licensing so we can stay current and in compliance with everything that's required us to. So that, with Todd's suggestion and help, I put that together, and we have a 5 years. But before we go back to that, there's two groups that I set out. One is called end user and desktop, and the other part called infrastructures. So end user and desktop, you're thinking of your computer, your monitor, your printers, your immediate switch that you are connected to in a room, in a data room somewhere, that you are interconnected, that first layer. And infrastructure is something you don't see: the server, the core switches, the firewall, and the UPS, and all the stuff behind the scene that help with the operations. So there are two pieces. I just to simplify it. So the first piece is the desktop. That's where I put changing out of 19 computers, monitors, and licensings, and 2 switches, and the license of servers. So that way we stay in compliance. So every 5 years, we could start back on a whole new program again. To give you an idea of what we have currently, out of that 95 computers we got 28 computers that's are from 2010 to 2013. 29 computers were built from 2014, 2015, and then and the remainder are from 2016 to current. So right off the bat, you look at 60% of our computers are from 2010 to 2015, which is more than 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old. So even with this program, we're still playing catch up. So that's where we are.
So,
That
so
makes
this
sense.
request is just for desktops and licenses. I think Don told me we've still got some machines running Windows 7. And some of those things just will be not supported anymore in the next few months. So again, we're trying to be frugal and appropriate about, not as much as we might like to do, but just what we need to do to get to a point where we're not replacing things when we die, we're replacing them when they should be replaced.
So, from my perspective, that was a great outline, by the way. When you focus on, the issues that we recently had related to server maintenance, the option here to focus more on end user finances and machinery, does that mean that you feel we're in a good spot from a server perspective?
They sometimes call it the blessing in disguise. Because of these disasters, we got insurance pay us for the new server. So because of that, we got a new server hardware coming in to replace the old one. So that is a blessing in disguise because I don't know where we're going to get the money from except coming to back for the following year. But we got it now. My plan is because we are to October now. We're going to put the budget together in sometime in January. I like to put a budget in for the backup software that we can have more redundant to it, that we can have more robust backing up to it, rather than we had before.
We've had a rather robust conversation at the advisory committee level about whether we should be maintaining servers at all anymore, or whether we should be completely in the cloud. I think that's a conversation that needs to continue because some of the platforms we're talking about, like the upgrade of our vision appraisal system, can go to the cloud. There's some benefits to that, but there's still some costs. I mean, having someone else host it is a cost that we don't have today, but we would have going forward. Maybe meaning that some cases down the road we don't need to replace servers. I think we're probably going to end up with recommending a hybrid approach, some things to stay in-house, some things to be hosted in the future. But just know that that's something they're very concerned, questioning about, and we agree. But this one server that we've just been able, unfortunately, to replace and completely covered by insurance, I think has put us in a good place for the next couple of years because the server at the police department is also fairly brand new.
Okay. For Chris, any questions, comments?
And these 95 computers, they're everything but the schools, the library, police department, I assume?
Yeah, basically, they are, yes. Beside the school, beside the library, you got fire, police, town hall,
But the police
COA,
should-
DPW.
The police all new? The police should all be new, aren't they?
They are not. They are not new.
They moved them over from the old?
There's still a lot older one in there. What you see is monitors, and to keep things consistent, we choose that monitors. But the actual computer, some of them are still old.
So everything really but library and schools.
Yeah.
You have to do it. You got to update them. Especially the licenses.
Yes.
Run an unsupported operating system. It's a recipe for disaster. Any other questions?
No.
No. Great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your turn, sir. Your turn. Anything else you'd like to get some more clarification or background on? Specifically, maybe for Mr. Bragdon?
I don't think, the fire department mobile units, most of that's going to be paid for through the grant, correct?
Correct, and the chief will be at the next meeting to talk with you about that. in more detail. Scott's here if you have any questions on the classification and compensation study update.
You actually had a couple of things, Scott, why don't you come up? You had talked about revising these, I guess, are we going to talk about the selectmen, revising the selectmen's? Is this part of that, or just want to look at the capital thing with him?
It certainly is up to the board's pleasure if you want to change.
Do you want to do both? We can do both, maybe? So talk about the classification a little bit.
Sure. So the last time the town did a full classification study was in 2002. We certainly, as we've hired new people, posted jobs, we redo those job descriptions. But that probably is 20% of all of the job descriptions. I can tell you the clerical union's been asking us to do this, so they're very much in favor of going through this process. And what happens is when we go to hire people, we're running a little blind, so we have to go out like we did with the fire chief and do research and find out exactly where we are compared to the market. We ran into the same thing because it was changing rapidly with the fire department. Pay is only one aspect of it. Benefits for two of our last senior hires, including the fire chief, were a deciding factor in the cost of benefits for people with families. So that has to be taken into consideration. So looking broadly at the market, when we come, we'll be starting negotiations in a year with DPW and the clerical union. We want to be able to have good facts in front of us as to where we stand against the other population, and what we should have for how many grades we should have, what's reasonable, what we should do when people hit the top of the grade, all of those things. And this professional help would help us be prepared for that, so we're in a much better negotiating place for that.
So this is really for professional help?
This is for professional help. That's exactly right. To come back to you so that we can tell you where to the market do our positions place. Are we paying high? Are we paying low? And what do the full packages look like? And that's what this will be able to tell you and to tell the negotiating committees as we go into negotiations. Yes. I do have access, we participate in a MMA survey every year, so I can get some data, but it's limited and it's basic salary data. It doesn't include all the other stuff, so that's why we have to go and do the research. It's important for towns to do this. We should do it more often than every 17 years, but it's important for
Why is it
towns
taking
to
so
do it.
long? I mean, I'm going to put you on the spot, because you're here.
I am
I'm
here.
saying, why haven't this come up before?
Oh.
And why haven't we done it?
Yeah.
Because I think you wait 17 years?
Yeah.
Shame on us.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say shame on you, and I don't mean that personally.
Well,
But why
say
is it
shame on
taking-
me, that's a
why is
personal
it taking-
comment.
It's not a personal comment,
Of course
it's on
it
the
is.
job.
It's a shame on me.
But why hasn't this been updated? I mean, we're paying.
Chris, I feel like you're raising your
No,
voice to me.
I'm not raising my voice. We're paying for HR director, and I'm sitting here and I'm saying I'm asked to spend more money because in 17 years, we haven't done this.
Yeah.
And I guess in my job, there's expectations. If I don't meet those expectations, there's consequences. What has caused us that we've allowed this to get so far out of date
Well-
that we're going out, having to, like when we hired the fire chief, having to go and do extra work and we spent money to hire the fire chief on evaluations and things. Why have we gotten to this point? That's all I'm asking. And so don't take it personally, because obviously you don't control the budget, and you don't control the checkbook. So that's why I say don't take it personally. But why haven't we seen this before, and why haven't we addressed this?
Can I jump in and ask a question which I think will help frame the conversation?
Yeah.
Scott, do you have, from the 2002 study, do you have the manual that says how to grade a job? The
Yes.
classification manual? Okay. Scott's been here for 8 years? So for 9 of those years, it appears, though I don't know exactly, that nobody made sure that when a new job was created, it was graded and put in the scale. When a job was not needed anymore, it was taken out. When the job duties changed, the job description was updated. When laws changed that said you have to have certain things in a job description, that they were all changed. I think that work didn't get done, and then if it wasn't a priority before, it wasn't asked of Scott to be one, and then nobody asked to spend the money to make sure we are up to date. It's not just checking the market, because Scott can go out and do a salary survey tomorrow, and he can do one every single day of the week. But it's taking a look at figuring out what jobs you have, making sure that they're all up to date, figuring out the hierarchy of them, and then looking at the salaries to make sure that you have internal equity among all the jobs you have in the organization, and external. It shouldn't be that we are taking a guess at what we should be paying a DPW director or a fire chief. We should be able to tell you. We should be able to push back to our employees and say, this is what your job is worth. You may like it to be paid more, but we're up to date with what it should be. It just didn't get done, and I think it's disappointing it wasn't kept up with. I don't know why it wasn't a priority given to Scott when he arrived in the last 8 years. But
And I thank you, Blake.
it should be done about every 10 years
I
at
could
the least.
Say a couple other things. One, in the first 6 years I was here, we did very little hiring, so there wasn't a huge need for it. And since the economy took off, that's one, we've been had to do the hiring, partly because of that, but also because we've got new jobs or people are retiring and such. So it's become a bigger issue recently when we're out trying to hire a machine operator and we can't get them. So, okay, what are we wrong in the market? Whereas 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that wasn't an issue. We could hire the people we wanted, and the market has changed dramatically in the last few years. So, I mean, it's expensive, and I can't speak for the previous folks, but it wasn't a priority.
And when we're done with this, what do we end up with? Do we end up with a profile? Do we end up with what do we end up with at the end of this 22,000?
Yep. You end up with a lot of things. You end up with updated job descriptions for every employee in the town.
And is that public information? Okay.
Sure. So you end up with that. You end up with an updated classification system that we can then use if new jobs or you combine jobs or the things that change every day that we can use, and use a system to be as objective as possible as to looking at that, and then we can price that against the market. So you end up with that also. And lastly, we end up with actionable information that we can use for management personnel, non-union personnel, and as we go into negotiations.
I think it's critical to have it done before we enter negotiations, especially with the clerical union, because right now we have a system that has 20 steps. It's actually possible that if you get hired at step 1 or 2 and you stay here for 18 to 20 years, you're going to get an increase every year. That's very it's not current technology these days. Most pay plans have less than 10 steps. At some point you get to the top and you don't get the same increases anymore because you're the top of what the market is for your job in Norfolk and compared to communities that we would be competing against for employees. You look at our competitors, not just the biggest towns or the towns that pay the most. We make a decision as a town of how competitive we want to be, and we say to employees, you're at the top, you don't get any more. I think that has long-term positive implications for the town's budget, which I also think we have to think about. And the system we've had hasn't done the town as taxpayers the service that I think it should. We have to negotiate that with our unions, and this process to do all this work will probably take a good 6 months. So the reason it's a priority for me this year is to have it done ahead of that process so we can go into those negotiations with really good data to explain to the employees we're negotiating with why we want to change something and what that means. If we wait a year, we'll be behind the curve. We won't have that ready to go into negotiations. Otherwise, I would put it off in favor of roads or something else.
Speed signs. No, I think it's, I think in a lot of cases we say, the horse is out of the barn, let's move forward. But this is one of those cases where you want to know, why do we have this lapse?
Well,
Why
and
do
going
we have it?
forward, it's going to
And-
be an obligation of Scott or anyone who's in his job after him someday to keep this up to date. I think what disappoints me is that for whatever reason, it wasn't kept up to date. And the clerical union, like I said, as Scott said, is behind us because they know their job descriptions are not up to date. And they should be. And it wasn't done, and I can't explain why. And
I would just say, let's keep, if we're going to spend this money, if it gets approved, yeah, as long as we keep it up. Make sure we're not falling behind, because it just, to me, it's absurd.
Yeah.
Because then I go to that next item I was talking about, which is, I don't know if it's item number 13 or 14, where you talk to the upgrades in our selectmen's
policies.
policies. And it talks about a lot of this stuff, what your job description is, what you're doing. And so I look at that, and then I look at this, and I say, why isn't Scott doing what his description says?
Well,
And that's frustrating, and I understand it, you don't control the checkbook, but that's why I said, the two of them, to me, almost go hand in hand.
Well,
in
it's
some
more than not
respect.
controlling the checkbook, too. I mean, I think what we've identified here is that for a full 17 years, this hasn't been done. And so that's prior to his arrival here. So clearly it wasn't a priority for anybody in the
No.
building up until the point
that
where he was
doesn't
on
make-
board.
doesn't
I'm
make
not
it
saying
right.
it's good. I'm frustrated, too, and I agree. It needs to be done. But I'm just saying, if the standard is set upon hire that this is what our operating standards look like, I mean, I find it hard to hold Scott to that and say, you should have been coming in and fighting that tooth and nail from the get-go, when that standard was set when he came in. This is something that I think everybody needs to make a priority, and something we need to do on a reoccurring basis moving forward, but I get it. Not having this kind of stuff done feels like we're leaving money on the table.
And please understand, it's also not our goal to, as a result of this, pay employees lots more money. Our goal is to make sure that we're consistent in the marketplace. We're going to be able to hire people that we need at a reasonable wage, but we're not also overpaying. We've been giving employees generally a 1.5% cost of living adjustment every year, and our pay ranges move by that. I don't know if we've kept up with the market or we're behind the market. That's part of what we need to find out and make sure that we're still in a reasonable place for what the town of Norfolk wants to be able to accomplish.
Is this cost estimate inflated because of the time that we've lapsed in
No,
doing this? This
no.
is what it would cost in
It's
each instance.
it's approximately, roughly an order of magnitude of about $350 a job description gets you all these things,
Yeah.
and then gives Scott the tools to keep it up to date after that. And we just, about a quarter of it can come from some leftover grant funds to pay for the work to be done. We need to actually nail down exactly how many job descriptions we need to have reviewed. It might be a little bit less when we determine exactly how many we want to have looked at. And that's part of what Scott's got to do in the next month or so, is go through them all and say, we want these job descriptions done, but these ones over here, we don't have that job anymore, we don't want to pay for that. And customize it to what exactly our needs are.
And then do we incorporate that into the job reviews and employee evaluations?
It does go into it because they're being evaluated against their current job description.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Which we have to do as well, right? Because
We're going to start those too.
behind on that as well. So
Well,
this will go hand
there
in
was,
hand with that,
for
or-
some period of time, we haven't done them, but we want to get back to doing them for a lot of
So
reasons.
this will help in that regard as well.
Sure.
And does it evaluate jobs? Does this thing help evaluate, do we have too many of one type of
No.
person? This doesn't have anything to do with that.
No, we could have a job description called administrative assistant, and it could apply to all the administrative assistants of a certain type that we have, or police officer, or, no, actual, how many do you need to do the town's work, that's a separate discussion.
Okay.
Isn't that the item that the Town Government Study Committee is bringing up?
So they have spoken to you in favor of this particular item, and why it should be done, and as we mentioned, interestingly, the clerical unions wants to see this done, so I think we have, it's nice to see some support for doing this work.
Is that our largest union besides the teachers' union, the clerical?
I'm not sure how many, definitely bigger than fire.
Yeah, yeah, they're all fairly similar, actually.
Size.
Yeah.
And the human resource policy is just a couple of changes you outlined, right?
Yeah, the
That's
biggest
all.
thing was I took out, there was a section in there of specific benefits for the dispatchers, and we don't have dispatchers. I did leave their jobs in there just because being a paranoid HR person, I don't want to have to go back in 10 years and negotiate putting something back in there. What led me to the making the changes at all was I went through all the selectmen's policies and made them gender neutral. So you'll see that. So I've posted that, and I also added the citizen communication
Right.
policy.
Yep.
And so that's up there too.
Okay. Good.
So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
And then Todd is here. We can talk about some of the budget transfers we have on the list if you'd like. Our thoughts, we haven't finalized any of our recommendations of exactly how to finance all these things, but we can give you our general thoughts on all of these. You got your free cash notification by email on Friday. Very important news for special town meeting to have dollars to spend to the extent we want to do that. And so we can talk about those sorts of things as well if you'd like. And if you have any specific questions or
How are we going to prioritize those, or how do you, now that we know our free cash number, do we want to?
So, we don't, I don't know that the town has a policy on how much it's wanted to spend in any year. What I said to Todd, if you want to come up to the microphone in case there's questions, was that this is really what so you're both familiar with the free cash principle, what it means?
Yes.
Okay, good. At 1.124 million it sounds like a big number, but that really has been our vehicle for capital expenditures in the year. It's perhaps a methodology of addressing snow and ice deficits, which we need to deal with, and it has been used in the past to help balance the budget in the spring, and we would usually like to carry some over for just things that might come up. What I said to Todd was, ideally, I would prefer, this is my personal opinion, not necessarily the town's yet, that we don't spend more than about a third of it in the fall. That's a challenge because we have a lot of needs, roads and otherwise. But, if you believe the Farmer's Almanac, it's going to be a difficult winter, and we want to be prepared for that. We only put aside $250,000 for snow and ice each year. And we were over that by almost that amount again this past year. And while I would ideally not balance the annual budget with free cash, that's a hard thing to walk away from doing, and you're going to have to think about that when we get to the spring and what the priorities are. One of the issues with free cash is how do we handle the snow and ice deficit? And I outlined those in the background. We can either use some of the free cash to do that. I mean, we have to pay for that. We've already paid the bills. It's one of the few accounts the state lets us deficit spend. Or we can raise it on the recap sheet, part of the tax setting process, and add for 1 year a few cents to the tax rate to raise the money that we were short. That's a choice too. On one level, it's if we have the ability to raise it on the recap sheet, leaves more free cash for the other priorities we may have. The difficult part, especially when we know we have a high tax rate, is to increase it for something like this to pay last year's bill. So I think that's an important conversation to have. I mean, maybe we don't wrap it up tonight, but we need to decide how we want to do that, because it doesn't show up here as a use of free cash yet. And Todd, I probably left something out of that explanation.
Covered pretty much everything I was going to cover. If you have any questions.
Well, if we pay the salt and sand deficit, that's a third right there of our free cash almost. Or is it a 291?
235,000.
235, 178.
Yeah, so that would be,
It's a fifth of it, a little bit less.
Yeah.
And we had prioritized about 350,000 in various dollar items here. You know, not all, in the sources column, you can see that in some of these places, there are other opportunities to pay for things other than free cash or a portion of them. Like the classification study, 5,000 can come from a leftover grant, leaving only 17 from somewhere else. And that's why, you know, half the radios rather than all the radios. One car for the police department rather than two. Making those choices so that we can make sure that at least our basic, really important needs are met, and we preserve monies for other needs that come up throughout the year.
The CPC, the 90,000 for the CPC, that's not included, though. That would not be out of the free cash.
No,
it?
that would come.
That's separate, right.
That's going to
Yeah.
come either out of the historical reserve or the open
Or the-
space and recreation.
Right.
So not touching free cash at all. That's correct.
And just because I'm thinking of it,
Right.
we can't use any of the CPC funds for a parade, can we?
No.
I don't think that
There is
fits into
no-
the three designations, no.
I know there's 3 designations, but that doesn't, in your past, there's no wiggle room with that.
I can't imagine there is, but we'll certainly follow up.
4 designations. 4 designations for CPC funds. Recreation, open space, affordable housing, and historic.
Right, but there's only actual 3 that you set aside funds, open space, historical, and you have to put 10% in each of the 3, what they call the 3 buckets.
Yeah, and I thought you were saying, you could apply for the parade under a certain category. It could be recreation or historic.
Right, that's what I was wondering.
We can certainly
Something to
ask.
think about, yeah. Yeah, I'm in favor. I hate to see us.
I would only go
Oh,
back on that
Yeah,
issue. Mr. Terrio, I believe, is involved on the CPC. So I would think that if he was aware of a mechanism on the CPC,
He would be
he would
the
have
one to
already
trigger it.
made mention of it.
Yeah.
he may not. People don't always think of the obvious,
But you
right?
never know.
You never know.
So we can certainly circle back with him.
Like I said,
Um,
Ed will help him figure out a creative way to make it historical, recreational.
Right.
I think it fits both of them. I like it.
Not against it.
I'm in favor of, I hate to see us raise the tax rate, so as much as I understand why we wouldn't want to do it, I'm in favor of paying off our snow and ice.
I understand.
I just think by kicking it down the road, and again, putting more burden on the taxpayers,
Right.
who,
Yes.
they're asking that question, I don't have roads, and now you're making me, you're
Right.
charging me more, and you're saying it's for salt, previous year, I just think it's a mistake.
I very much understand. It's really a policy decision of how we want to operate. And if we have a very difficult winter this year, it could be a real challenge.
Next year.
I mean, there are some things that are more discretionary on the list of articles here. The codification of our bylaws would be a really terrific thing to do. It's not a required thing. It's something that
Which item is that, Blake?
that's under the various capital expenditures, Article number 7. It's $15,000.
We don't know if the roll-off's gonna happen.
Well,
They
that
may come back to us and,
Todd and I are recommending that we do a borrowing for that and for Lake Street. Where it's a very high cost item, we've looked at our debt, and as I think I've said to you before, our goal is the debt goes like this, if not down. And we borrowed some of the money for Lake Street 5 years ago. We've pretty much paid that off, so there's an opportunity to, if you want to call it that, to borrow again and keep that budget item level, not have it be a structural deficit, but get major things done. It may be a way we can tackle roads in the future. But codification is a really good thing to do. It will make people's work of being able to research our bylaws so much easier and things easier to find, but it's not required. Same with our contribution to our OPEB liability. It's an absolute drop in the bucket to put aside $25,000 when our obligation is $21 million. But for whatever reason, that money hasn't been put aside in the past, because I'm sure there were a lot of difficult decisions about balancing the town budget. But I feel the obligation to start it. Does it have to start with 25? It could start with more, and it could start with less.
And we could also potentially put it in as a budget item on a going forward basis. That way we know there's a set amount every year as an alternative, if that's not acceptable at this time.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, can we put aside some for street paving with the free cash? We
Sure,
can.
you could decide to add an article and say we want to put $50,000 towards,
I think we have to do something with.
well, you could argue we are with Lake Street, even
Say
though,
again?
I said
Yeah,
you
but
could
Lake
argue
Street is
we
not-
are.
Lake Street's a road that nobody travels, Lake Street only is a concern to the people of Lake Street. Really isn't a concern to anybody.
I understand, I'm,
And I said, we told everybody roads, we've talked about roads, we continually talk about roads. And as Bob has said, the town has never made a commitment to fixing our roads. We wait for and so I say, we should be putting money into that, so that when he gets out of the gates in the spring, if he can show Keating that he has enough money in his pot, maybe in April or May, we get 6 roads done. At least we've let people know that, again, we are prioritizing where our funds are going. Because we all know this money gets swallowed up very quickly.
well, my suggestion is we start with a number, whatever it is, and every year we have to be diligent about increasing it. If it started with 50, then next year it's 100, and the year after it's 150. And by the time is it what we should be? No, but I think if you commit to
Gotta have a policy.
doing it, and you say, I'm sorry, we can't do this or that, we can't add an employee or
Right.
whatever else it is that departments might want, sooner or later, you'll see the difference, you really will.
So I would like to see some of this free cash going too.
So I guess the question is, how much would the board want to see us spend out of what has just been certified? Half of it? I mean, that's really what we're starting to talk about, if it's most of the things on this list and snow and ice. This is where it gets hard,
Mhm.
you know. I mean, what did, Todd, you did a calculation today of the increase to the tax rate.
12.7 cents per thousand.
So 12 cents on a $400,000 house is, you don't have a,
This is for the snow.
for the snow.
I'm against anything on the tax rate for that.
I mean, do you do it just this one time so you can get to
My
roads?
opinion, I wouldn't do it. I think we pay our bill. You know what, we gotta pay our bills, and we got some of these things that people want, the wants, they're gonna have to wait. They're gonna have to wait.
Oh, I'd
We have to
argue,
pay our
that-
prior debts, and we have to take care of our roads, because we keep kicking the can down the road.
I-
And we're at this point now.
I guess I would argue that there are not many wants on this, they're not wants on this
Well-
list. I've already, I mean, if you go back and look at what's really in capital, you not see all the things that the departments think they need to have. And what we've tried to do is pare it down before it got to this point, knowing that we simply have other priorities. I mean, we don't need to make these decisions tonight.
No.
Except if there was some, if I'm trying to get the warrant finalized for the October 29th meeting when you need to execute it, if there's something that the board is absolutely would not want to see on the warrant, for whatever the reason is, we just want to know that so I can remove it before we create a final version.
Well, again, I know we said we're gonna go borrowing. The roll-off truck is not gonna be included in our, is not gonna be part of our free cash.
We're
We're gonna try to go
recommending
out
that
and
we
borrow.
borrow for that
We're
and
gonna
for Lake
exclude
Street.
that from it.
Yes.
Okay. So the big ticket items are Lake Street paving, pretty much.
We borrow that and the truck, and then the other items in Articles, 3 through 8 would be all or a portion from
These funds.
free cash. There's money for there's a grant for the electronic sign.
Mhm.
That's 10,000 of that number. The HR update, there's 5,000 for another source for that.
Right.
there's monies in the salary line item of jumping down into Article number 7. There's monies in the DPW budget that could offset the cost of the mower rather than from free cash. There's a portion of the money for stormwater management coming from a state grant, about 16,000 of that. And MEC funds coming back can pay for the fire department equipment. That's actually about $35,000. Some of that could go towards police radios. So something public safety related. He's just choosing to take some of that money coming back to us and spend it in a different way. The other items would be, OPEB would come from free cash, and the well would come from, the Holbrook water main would come from the Water Enterprise Fund.
Which they may or may not need to do anyway. So
We're hoping they not, but if we have it approved, we can always rescind it later. I mean, that would be our goal, but we don't want to, we want to be ready to move ahead on all the aspects of that as soon as all the permitting's done and we can go out to bid. If we had to wait till get this approved in the spring, if we find out we need it, we'll be behind getting bringing the well online. So it's really a timing issue, hopefully. And most of the transfers at the top of the list can come from the KP budget that we approved the full amount that they had requested, and now we know we don't need. That's going to cover most of these shortfalls that we need to address, which is good.
I know it's rare this day and age, but I think I'm on the same page as you. I don't think I want to see this absorbed into the tax rate either.
Yeah. I think I'd like to.
Okay, so we'll add it to
Yeah.
transfer. And Todd and I will continue to work on this list and
Yeah. And
think
maybe
about.
some of the ones that have grants attached to them, could you put that grant amount in again?
Yeah, there's some columns here.
Yeah,
We'll
so we
expand
know.
the spreadsheet so you'll see exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll be meeting with advisory again tomorrow night to go over all of these in more detail.
And then maybe we can talk about putting some money into roads again, or putting something aside for roads at the next meeting.
I would, if we want to do that, which I'm not opposed to, I would want to see what that gets us. I don't want to just put an arbitrary amount in there and then
Right.
find out that it does
Nothing.
5 feet of curve, you know? I want to
Right.
understand what
Well,
that will do.
Todd and I will talk with Bob about how we can strategize financing.
Right, if we can get any bang for our buck out
Right.
of that. Just
Right.
because I think people, it's one of those, people don't understand why we don't pave more roads. They don't understand how much it costs. And when they hear that we just use chapter money, they go, that's crazy. I mean, somebody asked me that, they said, why don't we put more money into the roads? I said, we just use chapter 90 money for most of it, and they go, that's crazy. And you go, well, that's how we've done it over the years.
I can only assume that the budget pressures each year or priorities have been different, and it's like OPEB not being funded. It's getting paid for today out of the operating budget. Our retirees' health insurance is being covered, but it will become unsustainable at some point. So putting aside so it can make money, so it can cover that liability, is important. It's not enough by any stretch, but it's a start, and that's important for our bond rating in the future to make sure that we're showing we're starting to make progress on it. We set up a fund earlier this year. Now we start to put some money in the fund, and slowly we'll get there.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Todd. Thanks, Blake.
Any thoughts about the order? Do you want us to have the zoning at the end, some other?
I think I would still like to have zoning as close to the beginning as possible, from my perspective, just because I'd like to get as much captured audience as much as we can.
I agree. I think if we put zoning at the end, we're going to lose 3/4 of the audience.
Okay. So would you start with all zoning articles followed by, is there a strategy like overall you'd like to have about all these? Like all bylaw things, zoning first, general second, money articles last?
That's how I would probably.
Okay.
looking past the potential contentious zoning articles, I think the second thing that people would want to discuss would be the transfers.
Yeah.
So why don't we, I mean, typically I think we'd always done the transfers first. Why don't we just move zoning up to Article 1 and then keep the traditional
Everything else the
structure for
same?
everything else the same?
Okay.
And I think that our strategy in doing that isn't so much to set policy moving forward, but rather to identify a one-off kind of important issue that we feel a lot of people will have invested
Sure,
interest in.
I understand.
Do you agree?
I agree.
Well, it is your warrant, so.
Yes. And some are easier. I mean, you can get some of the,
Yeah.
the headstones, of course, everybody's going to agree on. I don't think we're going to have too much, so we can, put those ones more towards the end because they're going to be very quick. You know.
Right, so we'll literally move, 19 through 23 up and resort everything else, and we'll still end with street acceptances.
Because there's going to be a presentation, there's going to be probably a lot of question and answer period. I think this is a good strategy.
Yep.
And so anyone who is, any department heads who weren't here tonight will be here on the 29th. We'll also have a presentation from the schools about enrollment projections as it pertains to Freeman Kennedy, teeing that up for next year. But the fire chief will be here. The town clerk's office will be here to talk about codification and some of the general bylaw changes. And I'm sure I'm missing somebody. And the assessor's office will be here to talk about the appraisal system upgrade, which is critical. That's actually scheduled work. We need to get approved and done.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Blythe, when will the warrant, when will the warrant be ready for the public to see? Before
It's on the
meeting?
website now. It's
Are
on,
they done, though? I mean, in a complete,
no, the draft, the first draft is what was in the selectmen's packet tonight.
yeah,
It's on the website, on the selectmen's page.
I saw that.
And it will be, the final version will be before the board on the 29th, and then it will get posted on the town meeting section of the website.
Okay,
So basically, you always have access to the version that we're working off of.
okay.
Right. We generally post the selectmen's packet on the Thursday afternoon before the meeting. So,
Will they be mailed again this year?
my understanding is the town generally does a postcard for the fall warrant rather than a full mailing. That's what
Spring typically gets the mailed full warrant, right?
Okay.
But we'll put it on the website, of course. If anyone comes to town hall or calls and needs one, we'll get them
Sure, it
one.
might be good to mail
A
the
printed
full one this
version.
year, too.
Okay, thank
It might be too late, though, I don't know. 'Cause you have to have the funds to do it. I think if you get a postcard, you can request one, right? That's the deal. If you get.
We'll
a postcard
absolutely, if
allows you
someone
to-
calls and said, hey, I don't have access to a computer, can you print me one? Or they come, of course, we'll get them one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that was the idea behind postcard. You can actually get one.
Okay, we can talk more about it after we have
Yeah.
some more detail related to what's going on with zoning. All right, our next item this evening is to please discuss updates to the select board policies. Check. Anything else you'd like to add? We did, I just wanted to make sure there's nothing else you wanted to add to that. Beautiful, quickest item ever. Thank you, Scott. Next one, please discuss the status of the select board's full year 20 work plan.
You have a full 11 by 17 version in your packet.
Beautiful.
I know the one online, but a little challenging to read.
I like the blue.
I like the blue, too.
I like the blue.
I got excited when I realized I could actually create a blue category.
I think the select board did a great job. Are we gonna see anything on the H. Day school roof replacement? I know it's not money back in our pocket, but are we gonna see what the overall cost was of that, so we can see if we saved any money? Because we talked a lot about saving money on that.
I believe you will get those numbers closer to the end of the calendar year. And yes, there will be savings. There is some work scheduled over Christmas vacation because that's a nice long break where the contractor can get access to the building and finish those up. So I think we're just waiting for that. But
Yeah.
yes, stay tuned. You're going to be
One note on
pleased.
that is, and I fought it when we did it, was the contractor's coming in, 6 months later finish a job that we only got one bid for because many contractors questioned the time frame. We should learn a lesson from this. You know, we might have seen more bidders if we were more realistic in what we wanted. And I know we're not instituting penalty clauses to this contract, I don't think.
They,
It was
we gave them
negoti-
a extension,
Right.
and they met that. The difficulty, as I understand, is there's just some work that needs more time than the school calendar before Christmas allows.
What I'm saying is this work was all supposed to be done before school started. And there was a penalty clause in there if they didn't complete it, which is why a number of contractors probably didn't bid this project. So did we save the taxpayers any money by forcing this unrealistic time schedule on that roof replacement? And then now we're sitting here saying, we're gonna allow it to go on to December
Well, it's
with
punch
the
list.
same value. You with me?
I wasn't here for the design.
No, I
so-
understand that. Either was I.
So.
But I'm just saying, for the future, you know, because we do have to obviously sign these contracts, so when we balk at it, and everybody goes, oh, you're not being nice to the schools, you're not being nice to this department, these are the reasons why. Because this thing is, you know, this is 6 months later, and we gave this contractor an extension. And we don't know if another contractor could have done this project if we had made it a little bit longer period of time, or we were more realistic in what our goals were when the design was done for that roof. And I think it comes back, and, you know, it's just something to be aware of, because these things do cost money. And we're not instituting penalty clauses. I would say it wasn't done, it should have been, a penalty clause should have been instituted. You know,
For punch list work?
yeah, it's more than punch list work, if it just has to be done over Christmas vacation. I'm sure it's more than punch list work, and punch list work is not a completed job, in my view. You don't get paid if you haven't finished your punch list, so your job is not complete. And I think it goes to an unrealistic, it happens to be the first item on that page, so it caught my eye, but I think it's something we have to be really weary of and be a little more realistic of. And I argued about this when we started this, that, you know, the reason we only had one bidder was for only one reason, not because nobody else wanted to do it. It was because it was an unrealistic timeframe. And here we are, going to allow them an extension now at no cost. Something to think about
Okay.
as we administer this and try to save the taxpayers'
Well,
money.
when I'm fully in from the beginning of a project, I agree with you.
I'm just, you know, I just said just a point of note, to note, not blaming anybody. Just, I think, you know, make sure Ingrid knows.
Well, she'll be here on the 29th,
I will probably reiterate it again then, right?
no doubt.
Yes.
So if we could focus for a moment on those projects which are still open or looking to get started. We have a flurry of items that we identified in our goals for this year, many of which have at least gotten some traction from a discovery standpoint or a prioritization standpoint. But what I wanted to try to get done tonight was maybe identify a few of these that we might be able to get a little bit more focus on as we head into the end of the year. As once we get past fall town meeting and enter into the depths of budget season, it would be good to have a couple of these maybe hit the forefront for things that we as a board could really push for. Going down the list, I think that we talked about the visual budget on the website as being something that we wanted to focus on as we go into next year. That wasn't something that we identified as a priority. We talked about, well, let's talk about the good stuff we did. We have office hours that have been implemented. We had our second instance of office hours today, which was very fantastic. Thank you to the 2 residents that came and spent some time with us. Consider adding the Board of Selectmen agenda item for public comment period. I think this has been going very well. I think that Mr. Rosenberg would approve. We got a thumbs up back there. And the fire chief hiring. We went through a very extensive process where I think we came out with a fantastic candidate that we're all very excited to see start on December 1st. December 2nd. So we're eagerly looking forward to that. A couple of things I saw in here that I thought were done. Let's talk about Lawrence Street Bridge project. Bridge has been opened. Most of the work related to paving has been completed. What's left?
So there's still some, it probably can move to the closed category because we've paid out all the funds with the exception of the consultant has to do a state-required bridge rating documentation, and I'm not sure if that's been completed yet. And once that's done, we will still need to be monitoring the south slope and may have some planting to do there in the future. But it's hard to say when that will have to be scheduled. So I would move this to the closed column as soon as that bridge rating work is done and that final payment's made to the consultant for that work. But the actual construction, yes, that's all been done and done early last month.
Good,
Yes.
thank you. The evaluation of expansion of commuter parking, I think we established with our last conversation related to the cost of the commuter parking the town was administering licenses for, that we believe that that was sufficient for the time being, and that there was no additional.
I honestly wasn't clear whether you wanted to explore more commuter parking beyond just where we've been selling spaces, like we were looking to try to somehow add a significant amount of parking somewhere for commuters overall, or if this was just what we can control. If it's what we can control, then yes, I'd say we're done with this.
Yep.
So I can move that.
How many applications did we get for Liberty Lane parking?
90-something, didn't we?
It was 80?
Closer to 100, 90
Closer to
something.
100.
Yeah.
Chris is correct.
Wow. But then those individuals did not opt to go to Old Town Hall, and we actually
Some
had,
did. Nancy's just back from vacation today, but I think she said she probably had maybe 4 or 5 people on the waiting list for Old Town Hall that she could still accommodate. So pretty much those are all taken care of, but we do have a couple people to get back to. We had to wait to see who actually picked up their permits for Old Town Hall. Some people decided to bow out. It's been a little fluid.
mm-hmm.
And those funds go into the general fund?
That's correct.
So we're not earmarking those, or
No.
we can't earmark those?
You can't.
Okay.
So, yes, so that's all going to the general fund. So we should be, I expect the next week or so, we'll wrap those up for the year. Definitely some lessons learned to improve upon next year, the process, but overall, I think it went well.
Very good. Town government space needs, this was a push. Fire station project, this is dependent on next steps. Evaluate and plan for Freeman Kennedy expansion, I believe we're hearing a presentation on this on the 29th.
Correct.
Okay. Evaluate programs to reduce fiscal burdens on seniors.
So the COA director is looking at, she was at our last department heads meeting talking with the other departments about potential, jobs and tasks that could become senior work-off programs. So she could better advertise to seniors what is available. But I think one of the topics that this board may want to talk with the assessors about is we've only, up till now, I understand, put about $10,000 aside in our overlay account for this. If a senior can earn about $1,000, that really only accommodates 10 people. And so I think part of the conversation going forward is two things. How many jobs are there and people who are interested in doing them?
Right.
If we have 40 people available, but we only have $10,000 we can put towards it, it doesn't really accommodate all the people who want to be served. So I think we need to figure out what we have available and then decide whether the amount we're earmarking for this, and that's a conversation with the assessors, is the right amount, because we've got to find a balance there. So I'm looking for her to report back on where she stands with jobs and interested residents, and then we can figure out whether what the dollars we have is correct to allow that to happen.
Gotcha.
Because it's a calendar year program, so it's coming up on the time when we want to be getting that ready to go.
Gotcha. Investigate operational efficiencies. This is being grouped up under the ongoing conversations that we're having with our neighboring friends in Plainville and Rentham to talk about the regionalization of certain services.
Mm-hmm.
Develop a 10-year pavement management plan.
I think we have a plan. You heard about it, and there's a lot more detail than just what we present tonight, given time. But I'd say we have a plan. It's now a matter of financing the plan.
Right.
And delivering on the
Implemented
plan.
Right. So this goes more along to what you were saying, is coming up with a value that we
Right.
consistently will stick to moving forward.
Try to, right.
Try to. Right. Economic Development Committee, that's pending. Develop proposal to update master plan. This is something that we were targeting for after the B1
Right.
zoning was completed.
In the capital budget, under planning, there is 100,000, get to the right page. What's been proposed so far by planning is $20,000 next year if we want to go outside to update the housing production plan, amazingly already. And then into FY '22, $100,000 for master plan and open space. That's simply a placeholder number until we have the greater conversation after town meeting about how, do we want to have that fully managed by a consultant, somehow done in-house, so we can refine that amount and perhaps the timing. We may not want to wait that long to work on this. So I think it's just there to start the conversation about exactly what do we want to accomplish.
Yep, very good. Exploring partnering with the Boy and Girl Scouts for specific projects. Now, I do know that Recreation actually has a pamphlet for those who are interested in partnering with the town on their Eagle Scout project. So it looks like there is the beginnings of this already structured, but I think that we put this on with the intention of expanding that into more general.
So there's a selectman going to a Eagle Scout Court of Honor this weekend. Maybe he's a good
Perhaps
opportunity
that representative.
to get someone to come in and chat with us, maybe at a future meeting about ways we could partner.
Sign them all up, right?
There we go. POS liaison, check. Developing a town newsletter, paper and/or electronic. I think we understand what the scope of this initiative looks like. It's just a matter of where that fit into the priority. I think that once we go into the next couple of weeks, our focus will be on the distribution of items that are relevant to fall town meeting. But following that, I think this will be something important to focus on as we go into the beginnings of next year. Just because there's going to be a lot to get out, especially as we go into a very busy spring. Explore holding town hall forums. We had discussed holding one of these to be able to talk about everything that has surrounded and got us where we are today related to the public safety building. Obviously, we are awaiting some feedback from town council to be able to advise us as to what the appropriate next steps would be in the best interest of the town. So as it relates to that specific town hall, I think we're in a holding pattern until we hear more from our town council. But more generally, is this something that we would want to pursue from your perspective? I think, Chris, I've been looking for your feedback in order to engage the community a little bit more. Or do you feel that there are other avenues?
I think your open hearing at the beginning of our selectmen's meeting is a good start.
Yep.
I don't know if we have to do, I mean, you said you're getting 2. I think you got 2 your last open.
Three. So we're actually on a downwards
Yeah.
trend right now.
Next month, it's gonna be huge stuff. Next month, the November.
It's gonna be
is gonna be huge.
Oh
I
my
mean, people are just gonna, I may have to have a police detail to hold the people back. There's gonna be so many people coming. And don't forget, there'll be goodies served at the November one.
Oh.
Boy. Bribery is
No, I think I like the, it works, right? No, I think with the open session at the beginning of the selectmen's meeting, and I think the way that, I think the selectmen's meetings are allowing public interaction. I think obviously we have to do one for the public safety building.
Yep.
But I think after that, I think we have to sort of see how we roll.
Yep.
I think, in my opinion, I think, we're rolling on the right course. I don't see anybody feeling like they're being stifled, but I don't think, and like I said, unless we're getting 10 people standing at your door for one of our open selectmen's meetings, I think this is a good way of doing it, the way we are.
All right, so we'll table that for the moment, and we'll evaluate how the current initiatives that we have put in place in relation to resident engagement, how they span out over the course of the next couple of months. We talked about the visual budget, and then the expansion of the Conversation Corner program. Chris, are you familiar with the Conversation Corner program that was previously done by Jim and Jack? It was a quarterly program in which these two individuals would get together and they would go through a flurry of items that had been before the board for presentation via NCTV. There were some benefits to the program because it got the word out in a different form for people who weren't able to necessarily make meetings and whatnot. But we do have an array of different options out there for people nowadays that are able to get similar information out. The one good thing about this was it connected the community more to the town administrator, as it were, as opposed to a primary point of contact on the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board. So from my perspective, I think that there are inherent benefits to that. I think that, Blythe does an incredible job of her interactions with the community, and getting her out there as much as possible would be of benefit to everybody involved. However, I do not want to get redundant in what we're putting out there for the community, especially related to our initiatives to engagement. So would be open to hearing your feedback on what you think related to that initiative or what we had listed in the goals.
I think a lot of it has to do with how Blythe feels. Her time is available to do that, because it does take some time. And it would obviously, I think it's usually with the chair, isn't it?
Correct.
So it's your time and her time really that is the major focus. Do you have time to do that, and is it a benefit, and do you want to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, then hey, there's nothing wrong with that. And it helps more people understand who Blythe is and what her role is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I
I'm
know
open to
she's,
doing it. I think, changing up topics, I think, obviously budget is very critical, but there's lots of other things that the town does that I think you could find ways to help people understand.
they'll be
learn more
competing
about.
with other shows out there already, but that's all right. We won't name those, so.
Well, I don't know if this
Better
would
put your best foot forward,
follow the cadence of said competition.
That's right.
but,
You better, you may have some competition, but.
Just can I ask one question about the visual budget presentation. This is something we should start working on if we want to include it in the FY21 budget, because there's going to be a cost to having some type of a, whether it's OpenGov or ClearGov or the ones that are out there. I think I sent a link for the ClearGov one a while back. I haven't even had a chance to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Shall I send those back out around again and get a look and see if either any ones that are out there right now look like what you're interested in? Because if we're going to plan for a financial cost, I'd like to kind of have an idea of what you think you'd like it to be, and what type of information you think would be most useful for our residents.
Well, as well as Tom did up here before, I thought he was just going to code everything for us in-house.
Yeah, no.
No? Oh,
No.
rats.
There are fairly simple, straightforward ones. The ClearGov already has a page built for every town in the state,
Mm-hmm.
but they take it from already available Department of Revenue information. And you can go on it right now and you can see how we compare tax rate to other like communities, school statistics to other like communities. But where it gets interesting is when, if you pay for the subscription, then it drills down into information you provide them from your own accounts and gives people much more granular data about Norfolk and how it compares to similar communities. It can be super useful, or it can be something that people go, and don't look at. I haven't looked at OpenGov in a while, but that's, I think, a little more robust of a platform. It's just a matter of what level you think would be useful for people.
Yeah, from my perspective, I feel like it would be helpful for individuals to be able to identify what portion of their annual tax payment is going to the operations of municipal government.
Yep.
I think one of the greatest features I saw in relation to this visual budget was for an individual to type in their address.
Oh, sure.
And then be able to see, based on their valuation, exactly how much of their tax dollars is going to each individual department, and then it drills down from the department into
Right.
the individual areas and general ledger
Well, let me
codes.
send those links back out again, because I say you can already today get some information that we haven't paid for at all.
Yep.
And that'll give you an idea of what it would look like, albeit with more detail once you pay to join. And see if any of those are what you think you're looking for, and then we can start to figure out what it would really cost and what it takes to get it going.
All right. Mr. Rosenberg.
I wanted to go back one topic to the forum issue. So I agree with you that nobody should feel that they're being stifled. I appreciate the access I have and the transparency. I think there are things like the question of how town government works and what the responsibilities of various departments are that would be useful to explain to people. So what I'd like to suggest that you think about at least is having a forum where the point is to sort of explain how town works. A neighboring town did something they called Town Government 101, which is just an understanding of the interrelations between the parts of town government. So that doesn't fit into, something I would come and ask in select office hours, or, that I would raise during the, citizen speak part of this meeting. It would be a longer discussion about to help people understand what Norfolk government is and does.
I think that's certainly a way to go. Some communities have built on the Citizen Police Academy concepts, where people can come in and learn all about police departments and how they operate, and taking it to the next level of citizen academies, where you can get a group of 15 or 20 residents who agree to participate in, say, a evening 6-8 week course where they come in and learn about each department and get a better understanding of how their government works. And oftentimes then they're a great pool of people who might then want to serve in some capacity, because they've already gotten a taste of what we do and they want to be more involved. I mean, that doesn't maybe reach as many people as what David's suggesting, where people could just come and participate on a night or an afternoon. But either way, gets people more knowledgeable about their government.
I think that's a great idea also. Thank you.
Okay, well, since we don't want to enter into a TV ratings competition with anybody in town, perhaps we can shape the Conversation Corner piece into being more directed into an educational forum of some kind. That might be a good way to go with that, to be able to not only get Blythe out more into the community, but also to change the perspective and the kind of scope of what we're communicating. Very good. Although that would have been fun. You could have had a ratings tracker and everything. Whoever has more views has to wear a hat during the meeting or something. All right. After 10 o'clock, things get a little silly, so we're going to try to cut this off.
That's right. Do we want, one of the things we talked about was, and it's not on here, but, and it may not have to be on here, is we talked about the banning plastic bags and plastic cups that we were going to look into. And I know we weren't going to do it for fall town meeting,
Right.
but we were going to look at it for spring. Do we want to put this on one of our long-term or goals?
We can
or-
certainly add it on there for the spring. I think we ought to also keep our eye on what the state's doing, because there's
It's constantly changing.
there's
yeah.
conversation about a statewide
Yeah.
plastic bag ban, and so if they're going to do it, then do we need to do it? I think it's a question. I think we should keep our eye on that legislation
Yeah.
and determine whether it's still necessary, if that's really going to move forward.
Yeah.
But, yeah, certainly can put it on for the spring.
Yeah, and somebody asked me to give you their name, because they said they would help you. You had mentioned going around and verifying with small businesses, the effects on small businesses in town.
I would love a volunteer for
And
that.
I've got somebody who said they'd like to volunteer to help you out with that, so I'll get you that, which would be helpful.
Chris, one of the things I wanted to come out of the review of the work plan was if there was anything that individuals wanted to kind of put their name on and head up as we go through the end of the year and beginning into next year, or Blythe will assign them at random.
I'd probably be better off volunteering than letting Blythe give you one, right?
Well, you're working very close with Sherry now, right? With the Council on Aging. So
Yep, I'm
perhaps
actually be
maybe
down there on Friday, yep.
Perhaps that would be a good one
Yep.
to focus on.
Yep.
Very good.
Yep.
And then I will take the educational aspect of the Conversation Corner program and take that one into the next year. And Cece will take the fire station project, so she'll just do that on her own. And she'll, yeah,
Awesome.
that's what you get for not coming to the meeting. Although we do wish you the best, Cece. Quick recovery. All right. Anything else on the work plan project?
Nope.
No?
No.
If that's the case, then we're on to the consider approving some warrants. With Cece not here, we're able to just approve them for her, right? Yeah, okay. since you got the last three, you just want to take the list?
Sure.
Thank you, sir.
Move that the board approve the following warrants. 9/27/19, the amount of $839,547.21. On 10/1/2019, in the amount of $722,222.31. On 10/8/2019, the amount of $10,749,798.16. On 10/8, in the amount of $3,352.50. And on 10/8/2019, in the amount of $121,904.20.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
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 See how nice and slow I did that one?
You nailed it, though. The last one is the approval of some minutes this evening. Once again, we do not require our clerk to approve minutes. Thank you. So I would move that the board approve the minutes of March 19th, 2019, April 16th, 2019, and September 24th, 2019.
I would second that.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Blythe, anything else for us this evening? Anything else from?
Yes, actually.
Ooh.
Thank you. Past 10 o'clock. Tax classification hearing. We need to set a date for this. Sent you an email about this, it was in my weekly report. The assessors want to have it as soon as possible after special town meeting because we have a lot of work to do to, A, get the tax rate approved by the Department of Revenue, and also get our work done ahead of our appraisal system update, heading into a revaluation. There's just an awful lot going on. So Mr. Clark has recommended or asked if the board could be available sometime, say late afternoon, Thursday the 21st, or the week of Thanksgiving, the 25th or 26th. I realize Ms. Van Tine isn't here tonight, but wondering if either of you have a preference for either of those. As you know, it'll be he will come in and explain, go through the recap sheet and explain what the tax rate would be. The real decision for the board in a tax classification hearing is whether to continue to have a single tax rate charged for every property in town or a split tax rate. That's really what the decision is that the board is able to make.
What was the dates he was looking at?
Thursday the 21st of November or Monday or Tuesday the 25th or 26th. If there's I don't know if any of you are away the week of Thanksgiving.
No, I'm here, but I think that 21st would be preferable from my perspective.
That's fine.
All right, well, let me check with her and make sure, and if it is, we'll figure out a time. Any particular, if you know this far in advance what your day looks like, keep it as late as possible, or?
I would say between 4 and 5 p.m. would be best for me.
Okay.
But I'd be able to flex that if necessary.
I'm fine, yeah.
All right, we will work on that and get back to you, because we need to advertise that. And then, as you know, we have a public hearing on the roads for acceptance on November 5th. That's also being advertised soon, just so you're aware of that.
Very good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else in the audience this evening? Chris, anything else from your perspective?
Nothing else. We got the Boy Scouts on Sunday, and we have a meeting with the seniors on Friday at 10:15.
Senior Center?
Yes.
Very nice.
Yes. Busy.
All right. With that, I would move to adjourn.
Second the motion?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Have a great night. Thank you.